Hey guys, tonight we step straight into the frozen dawn of Viking Age Scandinavia. You picture yourself standing at the edge of a fjord, the sky just beginning to glow pale blue and pink, but the air so cold that your breath feels like shattered glass. Snow squeaks under your boots as you trudge toward a wooden longhouse whose walls creak and groan against the icy winds. Somewhere deep inside, smoke rises lazily through a thatched roof hole, curling into the grey sky like a quiet promise of warmth. For a moment, though, the reality hits you. Without shelter, without fire, you probably won't survive this night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you do, I'd love it if you dropped your location and your local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take those last few crunching steps across the snow toward the longhouse door, a heavy wooden slab reinforced with iron nails. It creaks open and instantly a wave of warmth, smoke and animal musk slaps your senses. Inside, the flickering hearth dominates the center of the room, a shallow pit lined with stones and glowing like a small sun. This is no luxury, it's the heartbeat of survival. Without that fire, every soul under this roof would freeze stiff before morning. You crouch just inside the threshold, eyes watering as smoke clings to your hair and clothes. The air is thick with the biting scent of burning pine resin and half-dried birch. Vikings didn't have fancy chimneys. They had a smoke hole punched through the roof, which mostly meant that smoke lingered, swirling around, staining the rafters black, and leaving you half coughing, half thankful for the faint warmth it provided. Historians still argue whether this set-up was intentional insulation or just poor engineering, but either way, it worked well enough to keep people alive. You let your eyes adjust. The interior is dim, illuminated only by firelight and the faint glow slipping in through cracks in the timbers. The walls are lined with wooden benches that double as beds, covered in coarse wool blankets and animal pelts. Above them hang tools, iron fire tongs, wicker baskets full of dried fish, and bundles of herbs strung from the rafters. This isn't just a house, it's a survival capsule, built to withstand the long Scandinavian night. You shuffle forward, boots thudding on planks that groan with every step. Your cloak brushes against the edge of a shield hanging on the wall, decorated with faded teal paint in a swirling knot pattern. A spear leans beside it, its iron head dulled but still sharp enough to pierce. And then you notice something you didn't expect: livestock. In the far corner, a goat shifts and bleats softly, its warm body radiating more heat than you thought possible. Beside it, a couple of chickens cluck and flap lazily, their presence tolerated not because they're pets, but because in winter, animals are mobile furnaces. Every breath they exhale helps raise the temperature inside these drafty halls. Imagine your bedroom filled with a mix of cousins, a grandmother, 3 goats, and a smelly dog. Cozy, yes. Pleasant? That's negotiable. Your stomach growls, and you catch a whiff of something stewing in a blackened pot. A woman in a russet dress stirs it with a wooden ladle, her hands cracked from the cold. It smells of fatty meat and root vegetables, thick and oily. The kind of meal that clogs your arteries but also keeps you warm through endless hours of darkness. Here, food isn't about fine dining, it's about energy storage, literal insulation under your skin. A child runs past you, wrapped in a saffron-dyed blanket, cheeks flushed red. He collapses on a straw-filled bed beside his brother, who's half asleep, mouth open, drooling into a pillow of moss. You can't help but smile at the simplicity. No memory foam, no feather duvets, just nature's scratchy mattress. And still, they look content, probably warmer than you with your modern thermostat habits. Then someone gestures for you to sit. You ease down onto a bench near the hearth. The heat licks your shins, the smoke scratches your throat, and suddenly you understand the delicate balance the Vikings mastered. Too close to the fire and you'll choke, too far and you'll freeze. It's a survival dance, practiced every night. Your mind drifts as you watch sparks pop and leap into the air. They remind you of tiny stars trapped in wood, desperate to escape. You glance at the roof and realize how dangerous it was. One spark, too high, too strong, and the entire longhouse could go up in flames. Historians still argue whether Vikings had effective ways of dousing such fires. Buckets of water perhaps, or just prayers whispered to the gods. Either way, fire was a gamble they had to play every single night. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the walls. But in here, surrounded by bodies, beasts and blankets, you sense the fragile triumph of human stubbornness. They may not have had glass windows or central heating, but they had something stronger: community. You feel it in the closeness, the unspoken agreement that survival wasn't an individual project, it was a team sport. You imagine the conversations drifting through the smoke. Someone mutters about frost giants, the Jotna lurking outside the walls. Another laughs softly, saying giants are only in stories. Yet the chill seeping through the gaps makes you wonder if myth and reality blurred on nights like these. Maybe giants weren't real, but the cold certainly was, and it could kill just as mercilessly. A quirky tidbit you can't ignore. Some sources suggest Vikings might have smeared animal fat on their skin before bed as an extra layer against the cold. Picture it, greasing yourself like a roast chicken, then sliding under furs, hoping to wake up less frozen. Historians still argue whether this was actually done or if it's a wild exaggeration, but admit it, you'd try it too if the alternative was hypothermia. The hours pass slowly. Someone pokes at the embers with a charred stick, coaxing them back to life. The goat shifts again, closer this time, its breath warm against your ankle. You exhale, feeling the strange comfort of survival. The long night stretches ahead, but at least you're not alone. And so you settle deeper into the bench, cloak wrapped tight, fire flickering against your eyelids. The Viking longhouse has claimed you, holding you in its smoky, sweaty, noisy embrace. You'll make it through the night, not because you're strong, but because the longhouse is. It's crude, it's uncomfortable, but it works. Outside, dawn fades to grey. The wind still claws at the timbers, but here, inside, pressed between people, animals, and fire, you survive. The hearth glows before you, a restless pool of orange and red, hissing and snapping as resinous pine spits sparks into the smoky air. You realize quickly that this fire isn't decoration. It isn't just a pleasant place to gather, like your modern fireplace with its polished mantel and decorative candles. No, this is the beating heart of the longhouse, and without it, every single person here would slip into icy silence before the night is over. You shuffle closer, the rough planks beneath you creaking, and your skin tingles from the sudden flush of heat. The warmth is almost shocking after the knife-edge air outside. Someone has carefully arranged logs, splitting them with an iron axe so they stack neatly, feeding the flame steadily. No one wastes wood here. Each branch is a treasure. You notice a wicker basket nearby filled with kindling, tiny twigs, and bundles of dried moss. It's survival architecture, plain and simple. The hearth is always fed, always tended, always alive. A woman in a teal wool dress leans down with iron fire tongs, shifting the coals so they burn evenly. Sparks leap upward like frantic insects, striking the smoke-dark beams. You cough as your throat burns from the haze. This is the trade-off. Warmth comes at the price of breathable air. Historians still argue whether Viking longhouses were designed deliberately to trap smoke as insulation, like a scratchy wool blanket for the lungs, or if the builders just never figured out a better venting system. Either way, your eyes water and your hair now smells like you've rolled in a campfire. Congratulations, you're officially part of the household. The fire doesn't only warm bodies, it cooks survival itself. Suspended above the hearth, an iron cauldron dangles from a soot-blackened hook. Inside it, stew bubbles lazily. The scent makes your stomach clench. Fatty broth, rich with mutton, onions, and maybe a turnip or two. The taste is heavy, oily, and comforting, exactly what you need when nights stretch 14 hours and frost climbs the walls. Calories here are less about flavor and more about building an internal fortress against the cold. The villagers ladle steaming portions into wooden bowls, passing them around, hands rough and red from the chill. You take a sip and it coats your tongue with greasy warmth. Forget Michelin stars. This is fuel, plain and simple. The light from the hearth stretches across the benches, illuminating bundles of tools hanging above. Axes, spears, and wooden buckets sit close at hand. You notice soot-stained herbs dangling from a beam, sage, juniper, maybe even angelica. The scent mingles faintly with smoke, a rustic perfume of survival. Some herbs are burned for their smell, masking the tang of sweat and animal dung. Others steep into teas for coughs and chills. And if you're unlucky enough to be sick in winter, you'll drink whatever concoction someone swears by. Think of it as Viking NyQuil, though probably tasting worse. You glance back at the fire. It isn't just practical, it's social. People sit around it, their faces glowing gold while shadows stretch long behind them. A man with a russet cloak hums softly, tapping his fingers on the rim of a bowl. A child dangles her feet dangerously close to the flames until her mother yanks her back with a sharp look. Laughter bubbles despite the conditions, and you realize this fire isn't only staving off hypothermia. It's a gathering place, a stage for warmth of another kind, human connection. Of course, you can't ignore the risks. The fire is both protector and predator. Too many sparks and the thatch above could ignite, turning the longhouse into a tinderbox. Too little care, and the coals die, plunging everyone into icy desperation. So the villagers maintain a rhythm, tending embers, adding logs carefully, banking coals before bed. Imagine assigning someone to babysit a pile of glowing wood for 12 straight hours. Welcome to Viking night shift. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some accounts suggest that children might have been tasked with fire duty, those restless little ones kept awake by coughs or smoke. Picture it, a 9-year-old poking coals with a stick entrusted with the survival of 20 people. Historians still argue whether that was common practice, but honestly, you know some modern parents who'd happily outsource bedtime energy to firewatch if they could. The smoke thickens as you sit longer and your head grows heavy. You tilt back slightly, squinting toward the smoke hole in the roof, a rough square where wisps escape to the sky. But the design isn't perfect. Cold air sneaks in while smoke snakes out, a cruel exchange. You shiver, even as heat licks your boots. It's a delicate balance, one the longhouse has managed for centuries. A man throws another log onto the fire and you notice how carefully he does it, angled so the flame catches slowly, not explosively. The log hisses as sap boils inside. Steam rises, mingling with smoke until you can't tell where fire ends and breath begins. The villagers settle into an almost meditative trance. Crackle, hiss, cough, sigh, the soundtrack of survival. Your eyes wander to the shadows beyond the hearth's glow. The benches along the wall seem endless, each one piled with furs and cloaks. Behind them, beams rise to meet the thatched roof, blackened by centuries of smoke. You realize this isn't bomb ye dead. To the first winter these timbers have seen. Generations of families have huddled here, their lives written in soot stains and axe marks. The fire in front of you has outlived more people than you can count, its embers echoing the heartbeat of an entire culture. Then, as the night deepens, a hush falls. Someone banks the fire, covering embers with ash to slow their burn. The blaze dims, shrinking into a red glow. The room cools instantly, a reminder that warmth is borrowed, never owned. You draw your cloak tighter, listening as breathing grows heavier, slower. Outside, the wind moans against the walls like a giant beast. Inside, you realize the hearth has done its job for another night. It has carried the longhouse across the edge of freezing death, one ember at a time. And so you lie back, eyes fixed on the faint red shimmer of the coals. Your chest rises and falls with the rhythm of the fire, as if the longhouse itself is breathing with you. For all its smoke, soot, and risk, the hearth is life. Without it, there would be nothing. The fire behind you crackles on, but your attention drifts toward the way people dress inside this dim, smoky shelter. You tug at your own cloak, heavy with frost on the edges, and notice how much thought goes into every layer these Vikings wear. It isn't Fashion Week in Paris, it's survival couture, stitched with urgency and necessity. Wool is everywhere, scratchy and dense, spun from sheep that lived just outside the longhouse. It itches your skin, but you can't deny its power. Wool stays warm even when damp, and in this frozen world, dampness is guaranteed. You glance at a woman wrapping a child in a long strip of russet-dyed cloth. The wool is thick and rough, but she binds it snugly, then piles on a reindeer pelt for good measure. You can almost feel the warmth radiating off the fur, its coarse hairs catching the firelight. Around the hearth, men sit with cloaks dyed indigo and teal, colours pulled from plants and lichens boiled in steaming cauldrons. The dyes aren't just decorative, they show off status, the splash of blue on a sleeve saying, "Yes, I had the trade connections to get woad pigment, thank you very much." Even in the fight against frostbite, people still like to flex. Your own fingers itch to pull on another layer. Vikings often wore linen tunics beneath wool, softer against the skin but not quite as warm. Over that came trousers or leggings bound at the calves with leather straps, and then of course furs, fox, bear, reindeer, even dog if the night was desperate. It's layering at its most primal, each addition less about looking good and more about ensuring you don't wake up as a Viking popsicle. Historians still argue whether Vikings wore fur inside the house or saved it for outside voyages, but either way, the evidence is clear. No one survived without it. A man pulls off his boots and you immediately smell damp leather mixed with sweat. The boots are lined with moss, stuffed in like nature's insulation foam. It crunches slightly as he shakes it out to dry by the fire. You blink, surprised. That's not just a myth. Moss really was used as padding, keeping feet warm and absorbing sweat before it could freeze toes solid. Quirky, yes, but also genius. Forget modern thermal socks. Give me moss boots any day if I'm marching across a frozen fjord. You reach up to adjust your hood and realize that every head in here is covered. Caps of wool, hoods of fur, even some helmets repurposed with cloth stuffed inside. Heat escapes quickest from the head, and these people knew it. Children have their heads swaddled tightly, only tiny red noses poking out like berries against snow. One little boy yawns, his hood sliding down, and his mother quickly yanks it back up because one uncovered ear in this climate is basically an invitation for frostbite. The firelight catches the colours around you, saffron yellow hems, teal cloaks, russet tunics, and suddenly the longhouse doesn't feel drab. It glows like a tapestry in motion. The palette of the north is earthy but alive, every hue borrowed from roots, lichens, or imported dyes that travelled across seas. It's easy to imagine an outsider stepping in and being dazzled, not just by survival but by the quiet insistence on beauty. You run your hands along your own cloak, stiff with frost. It's held together with a simple bronze brooch pinning the wool tight around your shoulders. These brooches, practical as they are, become little works of art, spirals, knotwork, sometimes tiny animal heads. Even while shivering, the Vikings found time to make survival look good. A cheeky part of you wonders if anyone ever whispered, Does this cloak make me look heroic while adjusting their pin? Still, you realize there's a tension in this layering game. Too many furs and you sweat, which then freezes once you step outside. Too few and you freeze immediately. Survival is about balance, knowing exactly how much to pile on, when to loosen, when to strip down. And without thermostats or weather apps, you learned from experience, usually painful experience. The quirky thought strikes you. Some sagas mention warriors boasting of sleeping outside with little more than a cloak, as if the ability to freeze less was a bragging right. Look, I survived the fjord wind in just my saffron tunic. Imagine that as your Tinder bio. Still, historians argue whether these claims were heroic exaggerations or actual Viking macho culture. Either way, you silently agree that you'd prefer all the layers, thank you very much. As the night deepens, you notice people shifting and rearranging their layers constantly. One man pulls his cloak tighter, draping it over his neighbour as well. A child wriggles out of her wool blanket, only to be shoved back in by a stern aunt. The longhouse becomes a theatre of fabrics, every rustle of cloth another act in the nightly drama against cold. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining what it would feel like to lie down in these layers, fur pressed to your cheek, wool scratching at your chin. The smell of smoke would cling, the weight would press heavy, but the comfort, the safety would be undeniable. You think of your own bed back home, sheets crisp and blankets light. Suddenly, that feels flimsy, like sleeping naked in winter compared to this cocoon of centuries-old wisdom. And just when you start to drift, someone sneezes loudly. The sound echoes across the hall, a reminder that with so many layers, so many bodies and so much smoke, sickness was never far away. Wool could trap warmth, yes, but it also trapped germs. Historians still debate whether Viking layering practices helped survival or spread illness faster. Either way, you pull your own cloak closer, deciding you'll take your chances. Your eyes adjust again to the firelight, catching one final detail. A man stitching a tear in his cloak with a bone needle, his hands steady despite the dimness. Even here, even now, maintenance matters. Every thread is a lifeline, every stitch a chance at one more night. You realize that these layers aren't just clothing. They're the fragile boundary between life and death, woven in wool, fur, and determination. You breathe deeply, smoke filling your lungs, wool scratching your skin, fur tickling your cheek. Survival has never felt so tangible, so fabric thick, so layered. And tonight, wrapped up tight, you'll endure another frozen Scandinavian night, cloaked in the stubborn resilience of the north. The fire flickers behind you, but what really holds your attention now is the sheer density of bodies pressed together inside the longhouse. You shuffle to the side, and immediately someone else slides into your space, cloak brushing your arm, their breath puffing out warm against your cheek. You can't help but notice the closeness. It's not just a matter of comfort, it's pure survival strategy. In the Viking world, every warm body counts, and heat isn't private property. You glance to your left. A grandmother snores softly, her head propped against a wooden post, her granddaughter tucked beneath her arm like a small parcel. On your right, a couple of young men lean shoulder to shoulder, murmuring in low voices. Their knees knock together, but neither shifts away, because why would they? Heat is wealth, and here in the biting cold of a Scandinavian winter, hoarding warmth is as selfish as hoarding food. It's not just people pressed in close. At your feet, a sheep bleats sleepily, its woolly body serving as a living foot warmer. Beyond it, two dogs are curled nose to tail, forming furry spirals of warmth. One of them shifts, thumping its tail lazily against your boot, and you almost laugh at how casual it feels. Forget your modern pet curled up on the couch. Here, animals are part of the insulation system, equal members of the nighttime survival club. Quirky, yes, but undeniably efficient. The longhouse smells of this arrangement. It's a mix of sweat, fur, smoke, and animal musk, a pungent cocktail that clings to your nose and refuses to leave. You wrinkle your face, but then realize something. These odors, as unappealing as they may be, are also proof of life. If you smell it, it means warmth and breathing beings surround you. The alternative, clean, cold emptiness, would be far worse. You lean back against the timber wall, running your hand along the sod-stuffed cracks. Despite the thick turf outside, cold air still seeps through, licking at your neck like icy fingers. Without the crush of bodies, you'd feel that draft like a knife. Instead, the shared breath of 20 people creates a haze of warmth, thick enough to make the longhouse feel like a crowded sauna. You cough, half choking on smoke, but you wouldn't dare trade it for the silence of frost creeping into your lungs. Historians still argue whether livestock were truly kept inside during the worst winters or if sagas exaggerated it. Some claim goats, sheep and chickens stayed inside stables attached to the longhouse, while others insist they were dragged right inside to share body heat. Tonight, with a goat leaning lazily against your shin, you're inclined to believe the latter. After all, practicality often beats comfort when the stakes are life or death. A child giggles nearby, wriggling under a wool blanket. She sticks her nose out, red and dripping, then squeals as her older brother pulls the cover back over her head. The sound of laughter spreads briefly through the room, breaking the monotony of shuffling bodies and muffled coughs. Even in this smoky, cramped space, joy sparks. Perhaps that's another survival tactic. Laughter as a form of heat, emotional insulation layered on top of wool and fur. You shift your position, trying not to elbow the person beside you. The benches are narrow, planks covered with straw-filled cushions, and every inch is occupied. You realize quickly that privacy simply doesn't exist here. There are no personal bubbles, no quiet corners. The longhouse is an open-plan dormitory where you live, eat, sleep, and breathe alongside everyone else. Your modern instincts might bristle, but in the Viking world, this intimacy was simply reality. And yet you can't help but find comfort in it. The rhythm of collective breathing, the rise and fall of cloaks as people sleep, creates a lullaby of sorts. You feel your own breath sinking with theirs, a reminder that survival here is communal, not individual. To live in a longhouse is to share warmth, share air, and even share dreams. A quirky thought strikes you as you look down at the goat pressed to your leg. Imagine being the animal in this arrangement. No cozy barn, no separate pen, just a spot on the dirt floor beside sweaty humans and restless dogs. Did the goats enjoy this, or did they tolerate it, bribed by the promise of warmth? Historians still debate whether this practice spread disease faster, but there's no denying it raised survival odds when frost threatened to kill. The fire sputters, sending a wave of heat across the packed space. You watch as steam rises faintly from cloaks, a reminder of dampness brought in from snow earlier. The combination of human and animal breath creates a fog that hangs low, blurring outlines. You blink, realizing the longhouse at night feels more like a living organism than a building. It inhales, exhales, and sweats, its heartbeat the crackling fire, its body the collective warmth of all inside. A man beside you stirs, muttering something about frost giants lurking outside. His companion chuckles, replying that no giant could survive the stink inside this hall. The two laugh quietly, and you smirk despite yourself. Humor again slips through the smoke. Even myths bow to the greater force of shared human absurdity. Your eyes wander upward, tracing the smoke curling toward the dark rafters. Shadows dance across beams blackened with soot, stretching like skeletal fingers. You imagine centuries of families packed just like this, enduring night after night, generation after generation. The walls have absorbed not only but stories, secrets whispered in the dark, songs hummed to restless children, arguments muffled under wool. Each breath you take now mingles with centuries-old breaths that never truly left this hall. You close your eyes briefly, leaning your head against the goat's flank. Its warmth seeps through your cloak, surprising in its steadiness. You think about your own bed back home, spacious, clean, private, and yet it feels strangely empty compared to this suffocating yet protective crush of bodies. Here, warmth is not just physical, it's communal, the collective agreement that no one faces the cold alone. As the night deepens, you hear the sound of shifting bodies, the occasional cough, the scrape of someone adjusting straw beneath them. The rhythm becomes hypnotic, like waves against a shore. You inhale smoke, sweat, and musk, and exhale something else, gratitude. Because in this strange, cramped embrace, you feel the raw power of survival, not elegant, not glamorous, but fiercely effective. So you lie there, pressed shoulder to shoulder, toes warmed by dogs, air thick with breath, and realize something profound. In the Viking world, the line between family, neighbor, and animal blurs. Everyone becomes part of the same machine, a collective furnace designed to push back death by frost. And as you drift towards sleep, you understand that in this longhouse, survival isn't about the individual, it's about the crowd. You shift again on the creaking bench, straw crackling beneath your weight, and suddenly your attention drifts downward to the makeshift bedding beneath you. Forget feather pillows and memory foam mattresses. Here, comfort is measured in how much moss, straw, and wool you can pile beneath your back before the cold earth seeps up and bites your bones. You run your hand along the bedding, fingers brushing through yellow straw, dry but prickly, with flecks of dirt clinging stubbornly to it. It isn't soft, it's survival. You ease yourself onto one of the straw beds, and immediately it rustles noisily. The mattress is really nothing more than a canvas sack stuffed with hay, moss, or sometimes reeds. It smells faintly of animals and damp fields, but there's something honest about it. You close your eyes and picture the labor it took to prepare this bed. Bundles of straw carried in wicker baskets from the barn, moss peeled carefully from rocks, stuffed and packed until the mattress bulged like a loaf of bread. Quirky fact, sometimes Vikings even mixed seaweed into bedding, its salty, spongy texture helping retain warmth. Imagine sleeping on what feels like the ocean's leftovers. Historians still argue whether this was common practice or simply a coastal trick, but the image lingers, seaweed cradling your spine as you dream of warmer days. The mattress crunches beneath you with every movement, and stray stalks poke at your skin through the thin linen covering. It isn't comfortable in the modern sense, but lying there, wrapped in wool and fur, you realize it does its job. It lifts you off the cold wooden planks, insulating your body just enough to stop the chill from creeping into your bones. For the Vikings, good enough wasn't a complaint, it was a victory. Across the room, a woman shakes out another straw mattress, sending dust motes flying into the smoky air. She beats eye. It's with a wooden stick, trying to loosen clumps and soften the stuffing. You cough, amused at the thought. Housekeeping in a Viking longhouse wasn't about folding towels or fluffing pillows. It was about making sure your straw sack didn't grow mold or attract too many bugs. Yes, bugs. Lice, fleas, and all manner of tiny critters made straw beds their personal playground. You scratch your arm just thinking about it. Some sagas even mention scratching as a nightly ritual, a lullaby of itching before sleep. Charming, isn't it? Yet there's a certain coziness here. You slide deeper into the bedding, tugging a fur pelt over your shoulders. The weight presses you down, heavy but reassuring. The fire's glow flickers across the straw, turning golden stalks into a bed of embers. Dogs curl nearby, their warm bodies adding to the comfort. And you think, maybe this isn't so bad. Sure, the straw itches and the moss smells faintly of swamp, but the combination of warmth, weight, and sheer exhaustion might lull you into dreams faster than any high thread count sheet ever could. A child tumbles onto the bed beside you, giggling as the straw crackles beneath him. He buries himself under a blanket, kicking his legs until the mattress squeaks with each movement. His mother sighs but doesn't stop him. Better restless laughter than shivering silence. You smile, realizing that even in this scratchy, simple bedding, joy survives. The bed isn't about luxury, it's about togetherness, a place where bodies can lie side by side, sharing warmth and stories until sleep finally claims them. Your mind drifts to the practical cycle of these straw mattresses. They didn't last forever. After weeks or months of use, when the stuffing grew flat or too foul, the straw was emptied and replaced. Farmers didn't waste it. Used straw went straight into the manure pile, eventually returning to the fields as fertilizer. Recycling, Viking style. You can't help but chuckle. Your bed could eventually help grow next year's barley crop. How's that for circular economy? But not every bed was equal. The wealthier families lined theirs with softer moss, layered more furs on top, even stitched decorative linen covers. The poorer souls made do with whatever they could stuff inside a sack, sometimes nothing more than reeds pulled hastily from a frozen marsh. Historians still debate whether bedding was considered a luxury item or a basic necessity, but one thing is clear. Everyone needed something between their skin and the biting cold. You roll onto your side, the straw crunching loudly, and close your eyes. The sounds of the longhouse wash over you, the crackle of the fire, the faint bleating of goats, the murmured voices of people settling in. The bed beneath you may not be soft, but it creates a barrier between you and the earth, between life and frost. You feel oddly grateful, realizing that sometimes survival isn't about comfort at all, it's about ingenuity. Then, as you start to drift, a peculiar itch spreads along your arm. You scratch furiously, laughing softly to yourself. Maybe the fleas have found you already. Historians argue endlessly about hygiene in Viking longhouses, debating whether straw beds were breeding grounds for pests or simply unavoidable nuisances. Either way, you resign yourself to the itch. After all, if the Vikings survived it, so can you. The child beside you yawns, his head sinking into the straw, and the goat at your feet shifts, pressing closer. You inhale deeply, the scent of moss, straw, smoke and wool filling your lungs. It's not pleasant, but it's alive, and it's enough. You pull the fur tighter, let the scratchy mattress cradle you, and accept the truth. In this longhouse, survival sleeps on straw and moss. It scratches, it squeaks, it sometimes crawls with fleas, but it saves you from the frost outside. As your eyes flutter closed, the thought lingers. One man's itchy straw sack is another man's life raft, and tonight you're floating safely above the frozen ground, buoyed by straw, moss, and the stubborn resilience of the north. The itch of straw fades as you rise, stretching your arms in the smoky half-light, and your gaze drifts toward the very bones of the longhouse, the walls themselves. You trace a crack in the timber with your finger, feeling the faint kiss of cold air sneaking through. The Vikings weren't architects of marble palaces or soaring cathedrals. Their genius was practical. They built fortresses against winter with whatever nature handed them: wood, turf, stone, moss, and stubborn determination. You step closer to the wall, where thick beams stand upright, lashed together with pegs and joints rather than nails. Between them, layers of sod and turf are packed tightly, stacked like green bricks when first cut, then drying into thick brown slabs that hold in warmth. You press your palm against it. The surface is rough, crumbly, almost alive. The turf still smells faintly of earth, a reminder that this house grew from the ground it stands on. The walls are not just barriers, they're stitched from the very skin of the land. But even with turf and timber, drafts are a constant enemy. You crouch down and notice wads of moss stuffed into every crack, as if the house itself were a leaky cloak in need of patchwork. Someone spent hours kneeling here, fingers raw, shoving green tufts into gaps to stop the icy air from slicing through. Quirky trick. Moss doubled as insulation and air freshener, absorbing smoke and odor while muting the wind. Historians still argue whether moss stuffing was common across all Norse homes or just a local adaptation, but looking at the effort here, you can't imagine surviving without it. The roof above creaks as the wind claws at it. Thatched layers of reeds and straw slope steeply, designed to shed snow before it crushes the beams. You tilt your head back, watching smoke snake through the roof hole, and you realize how fragile this balance is. Too wide a hoe. And all the heat escapes, too narrow, and the room fills with choking haze. The Vikings had no perfect solution, just a gamble every winter, choosing between warmth and lungs. Someone nearby adjusts a wooden shutter. It isn't glass. No longhouse ever had that luxury. Instead, it's a slab of wood or stretched animal hide, pulled across a window slit. In the day, faint grey light seeps through. At night, it's simply another place for cold to creep in. You touch the edge, feeling frost crusting along the seams. The shutter rattles in the wind and you quickly press it back into place. Even the smallest gap can turn a warm corner into an icy draft. And yet there's a sturdiness here. These walls, though crude by modern standards, have stood for decades. They absorb heat, hold it, and release it slowly through the night. You imagine the builders at work months ago, men with axes felling pine trees, women cutting turf from the ground, children hauling moss in wicker baskets. Building a longhouse wasn't just construction. It was a community ritual, a shared act of defiance against winter itself. You step outside briefly, just enough to feel the sting of snow on your face. From the outside, the longhouse looks almost buried, its walls sloping into the earth, half camouflaged under a blanket of snow. Turf covers not only the sides, but sometimes even the roof, making the house seem like a mound rising from the landscape. A stranger walking past might mistake it for a hill. This design wasn't aesthetic, it was insulation. A natural blanket holding in the heat of fire and bodies within. You can't help but smile. It's the Viking version of double glazing, courtesy of Mother Earth. Inside again you notice frost feathering along the inside beams, glittering in firelight. It's a stark reminder, even the best insulation isn't perfect. Breath condenses against the wood, freezing into delicate white lace. Children trace patterns in it with their fingers, giggling until their hands sting. The adults ignore it. It's simply part of winter life. A man kneels by the wall, hammering in a peg where timber has warped. He mutters under his breath, clearly frustrated. Houses here are never finished. They're ongoing battles. Every winter the cold finds a new crack, a new weakness to exploit. Every spring repairs are made, turf is replaced, moss is stuffed, beams are braced. The longhouse isn't static, it breathes, ages, sags and heals like a living thing. You run your palm along the turf again, imagining how it feels when you're half asleep, pressed against it on a straw bed. The wall radiates faint warmth from the fire inside, like a stone soaking up sun. You think about your own insulated drywall at home, smooth, efficient, sterile. This wall, by contrast, feels alive. It hums with the effort of keeping out death, and you suddenly feel grateful for every clump of moss jammed into its seams. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists believe Viking builders smeared clay mixed with animal dung onto the turf walls to improve insulation. Picture that, slathering the walls with a paste of earth and manure, sealing in the warmth while locking out the wind. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but then shrug. When survival is the only prize, you'll take dung plaster over frostbite every time. Historians still debate how widespread this method was, but the evidence suggests it worked. And maybe, just maybe, it explains the unique aroma clinging to longhouse interiors. You wander to the corner where the wall meets the floor. The sod foundation rises a few feet above the ground, shielding against snowdrifts. The floor itself is dirt, hardened and smoothed by countless feet. Straw covers patches of it, damp in places where snow has melted off boots. It isn't glamorous, but it keeps the cold earth from leaching all heat away. Again, function wins over beauty. As the night deepens, the walls groan under another gust of wind. Snow hisses against the roof, but inside the fire burns and the people sleep. You realize that the true marvel of the longhouse isn't in its appearance. It's in its defiance. Every beam, every sod brick, every moss-stuffed crack is a statement. We will not freeze. You close your eyes, listening to the creak of timber and the moan of the storm. The walls hold, imperfect but strong. And for another night, the longhouse wins its battle against the Scandinavian winter. You settle deeper into your bedding, strangely comforted by the thought that survival here is literally built into the walls. The walls sigh and groan in the wind, but your attention drifts toward another weapon in the Viking arsenal against winter: food. You catch the smell again, rich, heavy, lingering in the smoky air. Someone ladles stew from the cauldron into a carved wooden bowl, steam curling upward like phantom ribbons. You lean closer, hungry despite yourself. The broth glistens with fat, thickened with root vegetables, and you realize something crucial. In this world, calories aren't just energy, they're insulation. You take a spoonful, the liquid coating your tongue in a greasy blanket that spreads warmth through your chest. It isn't elegant cuisine, it's pure survival. Every bite is heavy with animal fat, the most prized ingredient of all. Meat alone could sustain you for a time, but fat, that was liquid gold. It carried flavor, yes, but more importantly, it kept your body burning like a furnace long into the night. Without it, you'd shiver, no matter how many furs you wrapped around yourself. A man across the hearth tears into a slab of pork, the juices dripping down his chin. He grins, licking his fingers, not worried about manners. A child gnaws on a bone, happily sucking the marrow. You glance at your own portion and chuckle softly. This isn't dinner, it's armor. Each bite fortifies you from the inside out, building a thermal shield your cloak alone can't provide. Quirky detail. Some sources suggest that Vikings intentionally saved their fattiest foods for winter nights, when the long darkness drained their strength. Imagine hoarding butter and tallow as carefully as you hoard coins. And yet, there's variety here too. You spot dried fish stacked in wicker baskets, salted to last months. Someone pulls out a hunk of hard cheese, slicing it into wedges that squeak against the knife. Barley bread, thick and dark, is passed around, broken by hand and dipped into broth. It's dense and chewy, sticking to your ribs like cement. You bite down, feeling your jaw ache, but you know each mouthful fuels the long war against frost. In one corner, a woman stirs another pot, this one filled with porridge. The grains bubble slowly, swollen and soft, releasing a nutty aroma. She sprinkles dried berries into the mixture, currants perhaps, or lingonberries saved from autumn. The children crowd around eagerly, waiting for their share. It's sweet, tangy and hearty, the kind of food that warms you from stomach to fingertips. You grin, realizing that even in this harshest season, the Vikings found ways to add small sparks of delight to their meals. But feasting wasn't just about nutrition, it was ritual. A large meal shared together bound the group, reminding everyone that survival wasn't solitary. Tonight's feast might be modest compared to the legendary banquets sung of in sagas, but it carries the same weight. Each bowl, each loaf, each joint of meat is proof that the longhouse thrives together. To eat alone in this world would feel like starvation of another kind, loneliness. Historians still argue whether winter feasts were frequent or reserved for special occasions, but archaeological finds, animal bones, cooking pots, fire pits, suggest that even in lean times, communities found ways to gather around food. Some nights the meal might be a lavish spread of roasted boar and mead. Others it might be little more than fish stew and bread. Either way, the act of eating together mattered as much as the food itself. A quirky tidbit. Sagas mention dishes of blood pudding made from animal blood mixed with oats or barley. You shudder at the thought but can't deny the logic. Nothing goes to waste when survival is at stake. That pudding, boiled and sliced, packed protein and iron into every bite. It may not earn Michelin stars, but it kept warriors and farmers alive in the dead of winter. You glance at the man beside you, his beard shiny with grease. He leans back, sighing contentedly, and pats his stomach. "Warm inside, warm outside," he mutters, grinning. You laugh softly, realizing the wisdom in his words. It's true. Fat on the plate becomes fat on the body, and fat on the body is warmth. It's like wearing a second coat beneath your skin. And then there's drink. A jug of mead is passed around, golden liquid sloshing lazily inside. You take a sip, the sweetness of honey bursting across your tongue, chased by the fiery heat of alcohol. It warms your chest instantly, spreading a glow that feels almost magical. The man beside you slaps your back and chuckles. "That'll chase the frost from your bones," he says, and you can't argue. For a brief moment, the smoke, the cold draughts, the itch of straw, all fade under the gentle burn of mead. The firelight glints off the jug, painting it amber. You notice how careful the villagers are with it. Mead isn't limitless. Honey is precious, bees sting, and brewing takes time. But on long nights like this, sharing it is worth the sacrifice. A small taste of sweetness can carry you through hours of biting cold. Your mind drifts to the sagas again, stories of gods feasting in Valhalla, of endless mead flowing from the udders of a cosmic goat. You chuckle. Leave it to the Vikings to dream of a divine keg on tap. Historians still debate how much of these myths reflected daily life, but you can't deny the comfort of imagining a heaven where no one ever shivers hungry again. Back in the longhouse, bowls scrape empty, children lick spoons clean, dogs gnaw on discarded bones, and the room fills with that post-meal heaviness you know so well, the satisfied lull, the drowsy contentment. People recline on benches, cloaks drawn up, eyes heavy. The fire still crackles, but it feels gentler now, as if it too has eaten its fill. You lie back, hand on your stomach, warmth radiating outward. The fat, the bread, the mead, they've done their work. You can already feel your body settling into the slow rhythm of digestion, producing the only furnace that matters now, internal heat. As your eyelids grow heavy, a final thought flickers. Survival here isn't just about blankets or walls. It's about eating enough to turn your own body into a living fire. Tonight, wrapped in furs and fed with grease, you feel less like prey to the cold and more like a warrior armored from within. And that, you realize, is the quiet brilliance of the Viking feast. Not luxury, not indulgence, but calories as weapons, fat as shields, bread as bricks in the furnace of flesh. The meal ends, but the warmth lingers, carrying you through another night. The heavy warmth of stew and bread still lingers in your belly when another vessel begins to make its rounds. A clay jug filled with golden mead. The liquid sloshes lazily as it's passed from hand to hand, each person taking a careful sip, then wiping their mouth with the back of a sleeve before offering it to the next. You cradle the jug when it finally reaches you, surprised at how heavy it feels, the faint scent of honey and ferment rising to your nose. You tilt it back, and the drink washes over your tongue, sweet, floral, with a sharp sting that makes your chest bloom with warmth. This isn't just a drink, it's medicine, celebration, and lullaby all in one. Mead isn't brewed overnight. Honey is precious, guarded by bees and gathered only in warmer months. Water and yeast are added, sometimes flavoured with herbs or berries, then left to ferment slowly in wooden casks. The result? A drink strong enough to make you laugh at the cold, or at least forget the icy draught crawling through the cracks. Historians still argue whether mead was an everyday staple or a rarer indulgence saved for feasts, but in this moment it feels like a gift straight from the gods. You glance around the longhouse as the jug continues its journey. A bearded man in a teal cloak raises it high, saluting the others before taking a long gulp. His cheeks flush red almost instantly, and he sighs in exaggerated satisfaction. Laughter ripples through the group, the sound warm and contagious. For a few brief minutes, the longhouse feels less like a survival bunker and more like a tavern, buzzing with camaraderie. Even the children giggle, though their cups are filled with watered-down ale instead of strong mead. In a world where water can carry sickness, even children drink something fermented, mild enough to hydrate, safe enough to swallow. The sweetness coats your throat, and suddenly the cold seems distant, as if it belongs to another world. You lean back, cloak snug around your shoulders, and let the faint buzz seep into your bones. Your muscles relax, your eyelids grow heavy, and you understand why mead is as much bedtime potion as celebration. You're not drunk, you're soothed. Quirky tidbit. Some sagas describe warriors drinking so much mead they pass out mid-feast, sprawled across benches like abandoned shields. Others hint that mead was used in rituals, offered to gods and ancestors as a token of gratitude. Historians still argue whether its role was mostly practical, hydration, warmth, or symbolic. Tonight, sipping slowly by firelight, you suspect it was both. Mead softened the edge of reality, turning survival into something almost festive. A woman in a saffron dress raises her own cup, humming softly as she drinks. The tune weaves through the smoky air, half lullaby, half drinking song. Soon others join in, their voices uneven but heartfelt. The melody echoes off the timber beams, mingling with the crackle of the hearth. You tap your fingers on your knee, smiling at the sound. In the middle of this frozen night, music bubbles up, fueled by honey wine. The jug returns to you, lighter this time, and you sip again. The warmth spreads faster now, tingling at the tips of your fingers. The fire blurs slightly, its edges glowing brighter, the smoke curling more lazily. Someone tells a joke, a crude one, judging by the laughter that follows, and you chuckle along, not even hearing the punchline. It doesn't matter. What matters is the sound of laughter itself, proof that even in the dead of winter, joy survives. Then, as the jug empties, a different mood settles. People lean back, cloaks wrapped tight, eyes half shut. The buzz of mead softens voices into murmurs. You notice one man nodding off mid-sentence, his head lolling until his companion nudges him awake. The hearth glows lower now, embers red and steady, and you realize that mead has done its secondary job. It's nudging everyone gently towards sleep. You think about the science of it. Alcohol dilates blood vessels, sending warm blood rushing to the skin. For a while, you feel toasty, even flushed, but the irony? That very process can cool the body faster in the long run. Historians still debate whether the Vikings understood this danger or simply didn't care. Maybe they embraced the short-term comfort, trusting furs and fires to do the rest. Either way, here in this hall, it's impossible to deny how effective a cup of mead is at calming restless minds. You sip the last drop from your cup and lick your lips. The sweetness lingers, faintly sticky, and your head feels pleasantly heavy. You glance at the children again, now curled under blankets, cheeks red from porridge and ale. A dog sprawls across their feet, tail twitching as it dreams. The rhythm of the room slows, voices fading, movements stilling. One final quirky image flashes in your mind. Sagas mention warriors dreaming of Valhalla after nights of feasting and mead, convinced that each sip brought them closer to the eternal hall of the gods. You wonder if they believed honey wine could bridge this world and the next, a golden rope of warmth binding mortals to immortals. Historians still argue whether those beliefs were literal or poetic, but lying here, drowsy and warm, you see the appeal. If the afterlife feels anything like this moment, safe, full, wrapped in laughter, then maybe they weren't so far off. You stretch out on your straw bed, fur heavy on your chest, and then exhale slowly. The longhouse hums with the quiet of digestion, the slow slide of bodies into slumber. The last of the mead jug rests near the fire, empty, its golden promise spent for the night. And as your eyelids close, you realize something simple. Sometimes survival isn't just about enduring the cold. Sometimes it's about tricking your body into forgetting it exists. Mead, with its sweet fire and golden glow, does exactly that. It doesn't banish the winter outside, but it makes the long night inside feel less like suffering and more like a story you'll remember fondly. The hearth sighs, the longhouse breathes, and you drift, carried on honeyed dreams into the dark. The mead's warmth lingers in your chest, but the longhouse isn't quite ready to sleep just yet. You notice movement by the hearth. Someone crouches low, prodding the embers with a charred stick. Sparks leap up, glowing briefly before fading into the smoke. Another villager joins, scooping ash with an iron fire tong, carefully shifting glowing coals into a tighter mound. This is the nightly ritual, the quiet ceremony of keeping the fire alive until dawn. You lean closer, watching with fascination. Banking a fire isn't about making it raw, it's about coaxing it to slumber gently, like lulling a beast that must never truly die. Too much wood, and the flames blaze high, eating fuel too quickly and leaving nothing for morning. Too little, and the embers choke, leaving the house to freeze. So they tend it with patience, adding just enough fuel, covering glowing coals with ash to smother their hunger without killing their heat. It's an art form, passed down not in words but in the steady hands of those who've done it every night of their lives. The man crouching by the fire mutters under his breath, as though speaking to the coals themselves. He nudges them into a tight nest, then blows softly, coaxing a faint orange glow into brighter life. The flame stirs like a drowsy animal, stretching, then settling back down. The rhythm is hypnotic. Poke, shift, blow, cover. You realize this is less like building a fire and more like raising a child. Attentive, patient, forgiving no mistakes. Quirky fact. Some historians suggest that certain Viking households carried special fire stones believed to embody the spirit of flame. These stones were kept year-round, warmed by embers, ensuring the soul of the fire never went out. Was it superstition, practicality, or both? Historians still argue. But watching this ritual now, you understand how easy it would be to believe that fire is alive, a creature demanding respect. The woman beside the man tosses a small bundle of resin-rich pine into the embers. It catches instantly, flaring bright, releasing a sharp, sweet smell that cuts through the smoky haze. The brief blaze illuminates the hall, casting long shadows of benches, furs, and slumbering bodies. Children squint, turning away from the light while a dog lifts its head, ears twitching. Then the fire settles again, its roar muted into a low purr. The villagers take turns tending the hearth. One kneels, rearranges logs, covers the embers with ash, then passes the stick to another. It's a rotation, an unspoken duty. Everyone knows what's at stake. If the fire dies, there is no easy way to rekindle it. Flint and steel can spark, yes, but in the damp of winter, striking new flame is an hour-long ordeal, much safer to guard the embers, to cradle them until morning light. You find yourself imagining the stress of fire duty, the weight of knowing that a careless nod into sleep could doom the entire longhouse to shivering misery, or worse. Maybe this is why children or light sleepers sometimes got the task. Whoever could endure the drowsy hours, half awake but attentive, earned the trust of the household. You smile at the thought of a child proudly poking the coals, convinced they were holding back the frost giants themselves. Historians still debate how often fires truly went out in Viking homes, but one thing is certain: fire was too precious to waste. Some sources suggest that when one house's fire died, a runner would be sent to a neighbour to borrow embers, carrying them back in a clay pot lined with moss. You picture it, someone stumbling through the snow in the pre-dawn dark, cradling a faint glow, praying it survives the journey. The image is both desperate and strangely beautiful, a testament to how fire bound communities together. The man at the hearth straightens his back, satisfied with his work. The embers glow red, muffled under their blanket of ash, but you can feel their heat radiating steadily. The longhouse exhales as though in relief. The fire will last the night. Around you, people settle into deeper rest. Cloaks shift, straw rustles, and the rhythm of breathing grows heavier. The goats sigh, the dogs curl tighter, and the children finally go still. The crackle of the fire softens into a steady hum, a heartbeat for the longhouse itself. And yet, you remain awake, fascinated by the quiet. You watch the faint flickers dancing in the ash, glowing like stars fallen to earth. You think about how much of Viking life revolved around these embers: cooking, warmth, light, ritual. The fire was kitchen, furnace, and altar all in one. To lose it was to lose the center of existence. A quirky thought tickles you. Some sagas describe warriors swearing oaths by the hearth fire, as if the flames themselves bore witness. Perhaps that's why the ritual of banking the fire feels sacred, not just practical, but spiritual. Fire doesn't only warm bodies, it binds oaths, seals trust, and carries memory. Historians still argue whether this symbolism was daily reality or poetic embellishment, but watching the careful hands tending embers, you see no difference. To live is to honor the fire. The wind outside howls again, rattling shutters and moaning through cracks, but inside the longhouse glows faintly, wrapped in its ember heart. You wrap your cloak tighter, lie back against the straw, and exhale. The room smells of pine resin, smoke, and damp wool. It isn't pleasant, but it is life. You glance one last time at the hearth. The fire no longer roars. It doesn't need to. Its quiet glow is enough, a promise that dawn will come, that the hall will wake to warmth, not frost. You close your eyes, soothed by the knowledge that someone, somewhere in the hall, is still watching, still tending, still guarding this fragile beast of flame. And so you drift towards sleep, carried on the soft breath of embers. The fire is tucked under its blanket of ash, the longhouse hushed, and you shift on your bedding only to realize there's a different kind of warmth at work now. Something heavy presses against your toes. You lift the edge of your fur cloak and find two bright eyes blinking up at you, a dog curled snugly, its nose tucked under its tail. It exhales a soft huff, hot breath rolling across your ankles, and you laugh quietly to yourself. Congratulations, you've been recruited into the Viking tradition of sleeping with animals. You look around and see it everywhere. A goat lies sprawled at the foot of a family's straw bed, chewing slowly in its half-sleep. Chickens roost awkwardly on beams overhead, their faint clucking punctuating the night. A sheep nestles against the bench leg, its woolly body pressed so close to a child's back that it looks like a second blanket. The sight is equal parts charming and chaotic, a barnyard blended with a bedroom. But in the Viking world, this arrangement wasn't about charm, it was strategy. Animals radiate heat. A dog's body temperature is higher than yours, and sheep are walking heaters wrapped in wool. Keeping them close meant less fuel burned, fewer blankets needed, and more warmth for the weakest members of the family. You might wrinkle your modern nose at the smell, the musk of dung clinging faintly to the air. But to a Viking, it smelled like life, the stink of survival. A child shifts restlessly, his tiny toes sticking out from under a blanket. Instantly, the sheep beside him edges closer, pressing its side against his feet. The boy sighs in relief and curls up again. You smile, realizing that in this hall, animals aren't just livestock, they're guardians of warmth, protectors of sleep. Quirky tidbit. Some sagas and folk tales mention dogs as protectors in more than just warmth. They guarded against spirits, frost giants, and misfortune. Creeping in through the night. A dog at your feet wasn't just a heater, it was a spiritual shield. Historians still argue whether this was literal belief or poetic symbolism, but watching the way the dog curls around your toes, you find it easy to believe. The goats bleat softly, shuffling on their hooves. One sniffs the floor, finds a scrap of straw and chews noisily. You wince at the crunch, but no one else stirs. They're used to this, the midnight munching, the occasional squabble between goats and dogs, even the rare accident in the corner. Life in the longhouse meant tolerating such chaos. Comfort didn't come in silence or cleanliness, it came in warmth, and animals provided plenty of it. You shift your own feet, wiggling your toes against the dog's belly. It stirs, glances at you, then sighs again, too tired to move. Its fur is coarse but thick, and your ankles feel like they're wrapped in wool. The sensation spreads upward, lulling you deeper into relaxation. You think of your bed back home, sterile and orderly, pets relegated to their own spaces. Suddenly, it seems lonely by comparison. Here, sleep is communal, not just with people, but with the entire ecosystem of the farm. You imagine the daily rhythm that brought these animals inside. At dusk, after a long day of tending fields or chopping wood, families herded goats and sheep through the heavy longhouse door. Chickens flapped noisily to their perches, dogs bounded in happily, and suddenly the hall was alive with bleats, clucks, and barks. Then, as the fire burned and people settled, so too did the animals, tucking themselves into corners, curling at feet, dozing beneath benches. By midnight, the chaos faded into the soft symphony of shared sleep. Historians still debate how common this practice was. Some argue that livestock stayed in attached stalls, separated by low partitions, while only dogs and perhaps a goat or two shared the central space. Others insist that in the harshest winters, everything that breathed warmth was brought directly into the living area. Looking around this hall, with creatures spread across straw and dirt, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. Practicality deciding who slept where. The smell grows heavier as you lie there, smoke, sweat and manure weaving into one pungent perfume. You wrinkle your nose but don't move away. It's strange, but comforting in its own way. These scents are proof that life fills the hall, that breath warms the air, that frost has not yet claimed its victims. In this world, clean air is cold air, and cold air means danger. Better a stinking hall than a frozen one. A woman shifts in her sleep, pulling her child closer, and the family dog instantly moves with them, curling tighter to their side. You watch as the child's hand slips from under the blanket, resting on the dog's back. The dog doesn't flinch. It stays perfectly still, as though it knows its role isn't just to warm, but to guard. You smile softly, struck by the unspoken trust between them. Your mind drifts back to myths again. You recall tales of Garm, the hound said to guard the gates of hell, and of Odin's wolves, Jerry and Freki, always at his side. Dogs in Norse lore weren't just pets. They were companions of gods, guardians of thresholds, symbols of loyalty. Maybe that's why sleeping beside one feels like safety. It's not only body heat, it's something older, deeper, embedded in memory and myth. The goats shuffle again, bleating softly, and you chuckle. Less mystical, more practical, these clumsy creatures are heaters with hooves. Still, their presence matters. Every bit of warmth adds yield. P. The animals aren't guests in this hall. They're part of the survival team. You tuck your feet back under the fur cloak, the dog pressed firmly against you, and exhale. The longhouse hums with the collective warmth of people and beasts, a strange, unpolished harmony. Your eyelids grow heavy, lulled by the rhythm of breathing, human and animal alike. And as you drift, one thought anchors you. In the Viking world, survival meant blurring lines. Family, neighbour, goat, dog, all pressed together, all sharing warmth, all part of the same fragile struggle. You might wrinkle your modern nose, but lying here with a dog at your feet and a goat by your side, you feel what the Vikings must have felt. Safe, sheltered, alive. The night deepens, and though the embers glow softly, another force fills the longhouse. Smell. You breathe in slowly, and the mixture almost overwhelms you. Smoke from the hearth, sweat from cloaks and bodies, damp straw, and the unmistakable tang of animal musk. At first it seems unbearable, but then you realize this is simply the perfume of survival. If you smell it, it means life is here. Heat, breath, movement. Clean air belongs outside, sharp and icy, and it kills. Inside, the air is heavy, smoky, pungent, and alive. You shift your cloak, the fabric scratching against your skin, and the scent of wool rises, earthy, oily, carrying the faint memory of sheep's lanolin. Around you, others adjust their bedding, releasing small bursts of odour. The acrid bite of sweat trapped in furs, the sour tang of damp moss stuffed into boots, the smoky sweetness of resin clinging to hair. No one comments. They don't need to. In the Viking world, smell isn't something to fight. It's something you endure. Your eyes sting as another wave of smoke drifts low across the hall. The roof hole above isn't wide enough to carry it all out, so it lingers, rolling through the rafters like a grey tide. You cough into your sleeve, realizing how quickly your throat burns from the haze. Children cough too, their tiny bodies racked with the effort. Yet no one panics. This is ordinary. The longhouse is both sanctuary and smokehouse, curing not only meat but lungs. Historians still argue about the long-term effects of this environment. Did Vikings live with constant respiratory issues? Did their eyes water daily? Evidence suggests yes. Some skulls unearthed from settlements show sinus damage, possibly caused by years of inhaling soot. But what choice did they have? Without smoke, there was no warmth. Without warmth, there was no survival. You take another smoky breath, and though it stings, you underdares. Stand. This pain is the cost of life. A man beside the fire stirs a pot, adding another log to the flames. As it catches, the resin crackles, releasing an almost sweet aroma, pine and sap blending with the acrid haze. For a moment the smell sharpens, less suffocating, almost pleasant. You close your eyes, imagining how even subtle changes in fuel altered the atmosphere of the hall. Birch bark for quick flames, pine resin for long burning, oak for slow, steady heat. Every log carries not just heat, but scent, shaping the night's experience. You glance at the beams above, thick with soot, they're black as tar, shiny where smoke has polished them. Occasionally, droplets of condensed tar drip down, staining cloaks or furs. The rafters smell permanently of fire, a scent that never leaves. You imagine waking each morning with hair and clothes saturated, stepping outside into fresh snow only to carry the longhouse odour with you like a second skin. Quirky tidbit. Some sources suggest that the smoky air actually helped preserve wooden beams from rot, acting like a natural preservative. Historians still argue whether this was intentional or accidental, but you can't help but think of it as a silver lining. Lungs might suffer, but the roof lasts longer. The animals add their own notes to the olfactory symphony. A goat shifts and releases a pungent burst that makes you wrinkle your nose. Chickens overhead flap briefly, feathers scattering dust that rains down. A dog shakes itself, the musky scent of wet fur wafting toward you. Each odor is distinct, layered and unignorable, yet no one complains. In a world without perfumes, candles or air fresheners, smell is simply part of life. It marks presence, proof that the longhouse is full and thriving. Your modern brain rebels for a moment, craving the crisp, clean air of an open window. But then you remind yourself, open a window, ear, and you invite in death. Better to smell sweat than frost, dung than silence. The hierarchy of senses shifts in this world. Comfort isn't measured by freshness, but by warmth. A child sneezes, and his mother wipes his nose with a strip of cloth, then tucks him back under the furs. The cloth, already damp, adds another layer to the hall's scent. Sour, human, intimate. You shake your head, smiling softly. It's unglamorous, yes, but it's life. And in this hall, life is fragrant with everything that sustains it. Quirky fact. Some sources hint that Vikings used herbs like juniper, sage, or thyme not only in food but also to mask odors. Bundles of these plants hang from the rafters here, faintly perfuming the smoke with a sharper herbal note. Perhaps they were burned, releasing scents that cut through the heaviness. Historians still debate whether this was hygiene or ritual cleansing, but either way, the hall smells slightly less oppressive when the herbs catch. You inhale deeply, grateful for even the faintest whiff of freshness. And then there's the smell of people themselves. The longhouse is crowded, and bodies pressed close create a humid heat, a dense, almost animal-like musk. You smell unwashed hair, the salt of dried sweat, the faint tang of leather and iron. It's overwhelming at first, but then your senses adjust. Soon it fades into background, becoming as ordinary as the creak of timbers or the hiss of embers. You realize this odor is a collective signature, unique to this hall, this group, this night. If you were blindfolded and led here, you'd know instantly where you were, not by sight, but by smell. Your thoughts wander as you lie back, breathing shallowly through your cloak. You imagine sagas told in this haze, voices muffled by smoke, laughter punctuating coughs. You wonder how many generations inhaled this same mix, lungs and eyes watering in the same way. The walls are saturated with centuries of scent, smoke, sweat, herbs, animals, all embedded like memory in the wood. The dog at your feet shifts again, pressing its warm body closer. You stroke its coarse fur absent-mindedly, your fingers picking up the musky smell. It clings to your hand, earthy and raw. You don't wipe it away. Instead, you bring your hand close and inhale. Strange, but comforting. In this longhouse, smell is intimacy, proof of closeness, proof of life shared. Historians still argue whether Vikings cared much about personal hygiene. Some evidence suggests they bathed weekly, unusual for the time, using hot springs or wooden tubs. Others argue that in winter bathing was rare, impossible in frozen conditions. But whether they bathed or not, the longhouse carried its own unavoidable aroma. And lying here, breathing it in, you realize that what you once thought of as unpleasant is actually a reminder. Everyone is alive, together, surviving another night. The smoke thickens briefly as a log shifts, releasing a cloud that makes your eyes sting. You cough, wiping your face with your sleeve. Then it settles again, and you exhale slowly, surrendering to the haze. Your senses dull, your eyelids grow heavy, and the smells become a lullaby in their own right. You smile faintly at the thought. In the Viking world, sleep doesn't come scented with lavender candles or fresh linen. It comes wrapped in smoke, musk, sweat, and furs, and somehow it works. The longhouse hums with slow breathing, the smoke curling gently upward when a different sound rises. A voice. You tilt your head and realize someone is speaking in the dimness, words low and steady, weaving through the haze like invisible thread. A few children shift, their eyes half open, listening. Even the adults lean closer, their faces softened by the fire's red glow. The story hour has begun. The speaker, an older man with a beard streaked white, sits cross-legged by the hearth. His cloak slips from his shoulder, revealing a tunic patched in places, worn but proud. He leans on his knee, his hand gesturing as if pulling invisible shapes from the smoke. His voice is gentle, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The sagas unfold, not as dusty text, but as living words spilling into the air. You realize quickly, in a world without books, stories are warmth, as important as fire or furs. He begins with something familiar, a tale of Thor, hammer in hand, crossing the frozen plains in search of giants. His voice rises and falls like waves, each phrase punctuated by a pause, allowing listeners to breathe in the images. You see the children's eyes widen, their imaginations filling the longhouse with visions of storms, giants, and thunderclaps. The room, smoky and dim, transforms into a theatre, its stage no larger than the space between fire and storyteller. Quirky tidbit. Some historians believe sagas weren't only entertainment, they were memory devices, ways of preserving history, lore, and identity. The rhythm and repetition made them easier to remember, easier to pass down. Tonight, you see the truth in that. The man's cadence is so steady, so deliberate, you know his story will live in the minds of every child huddled here, carried forward like the embers of the fire. The tale shifts from gods to ancestors. He speaks of voyages across seas, of battles fought, of winters survived. Each story is part myth, part history, the line between them blurred as smoke between beams. You hear murmurs of agreement, nods of recognition, as if these aren't just stories but shared memories. The longhouse itself seems to lean in, rafters groaning, smoke curling tighter, as though even the beams listen. You close your eyes and let the words wash over you. His voice paints images sharper than sight. Ships creaking against ice, warriors wrapped in furs, the shimmer of the aurora lighting the northern sky. The story carries you outside, far beyond the smoky hall, into landscapes vast and terrifying. You feel the bite of salt wind, the crash of waves, the glow of fire on cold seas. Then, as he lowers his voice, you are pulled back, safe again in the longhouse, surrounded by warmth. Historians still argue whether sagas were recited nightly or only at special gatherings. But lying here, lulled by the voice, you can't imagine a night without them. Without stories, the dark would stretch endlessly, a void pressing down. Stories fill that void with meaning, with laughter, with fear and hope. They are insulation for the mind, blankets for the spirit. The children giggle as the old man mimics Loki, sly and sharp, his voice suddenly nasal and quick. Then they gasp as he shifts to a deep growl, embodying a frost giant. Even the adults chuckle, the tension of survival loosening into shared amusement. You realize the performance isn't just about words, it's about voice, gesture, mimicry. In this hall, storytelling is theatre, and the audience leans on every syllable. A quirky fact comes to mind. Some scholars suggest storytellers may have used carved sticks or runes as props, holding them while reciting to aid memory. Others argue it was purely oral, no props needed. Historians still debate it, but tonight you see no props in his hands, only smoke, firelight, and imagination, and it is enough. The story drifts again, this time softer, a tale of lovers separated by sea, of a reunion promised with the spring thaw. The children's eyes droop, lulled by the gentler tone. One girl rests her head on her mother's lap, her small hand curling around the edge of a fur. The rhythm slows, words stretching long, as though even the story itself is falling asleep. You glance around and notice the effect. Shoulders slump, eyes close, breathing deepens. The storyteller, knowingly or not, is guiding the entire hall toward rest. His saga is lullaby disguised as legend, carrying listeners gently toward dreams. You feel it too, the pull of words sinking into your body, heavier than mead, softer than furs. And then, a final flourish. He ends with a whispered phrase, a promise that warmth will last, that spring will return, that no frost giant can hold sway forever. Silence follows, heavy but sweet. For a moment, the only sound is the crackle of embers. Then, slowly, bodies shift, settling fully into slumber. The story has done its work. You breathe deeply, smoke thick in your lungs, but spirit soothed by the tale. You think of your own modern world, books, movies, podcasts, yet none of them feel like this. Here, the story isn't entertainment at a distance. It's survival woven into voice, presence, community. Without it, the night would feel endless. With it, the longhouse glows even in darkness. Quirky tidbit again. Some sagas were considered so important that forgetting them was a disgrace. A storyteller might be mocked or punished for missing a lit. Nay. Historians still argue how rigid this tradition was, but it reveals something profound. Stories weren't optional. They were as necessary as food or fire. The old man lies back now, cloak over his shoulder, his work done. The longhouse breathes slower, heavier. You close your eyes, hearing faint echoes of his tale still drifting in your mind. Giants and gods, ships and storms, love and spring, all blending into your dreams. And as you drift, you realize something simple. In the Viking world, warmth wasn't only from fire or furs, it was also from words. Stories filled the dark, kept minds from freezing, and carried hope through nights that might otherwise crush the spirit. Tonight, wrapped in smoke and sagas, you sleep not just warm but alive. The longhouse sinks deeper into silence, the storyteller's voice fading into memory when your mind drifts to the strange figures that haunt these winter nights. You shift on your straw bed, pull the cloak tighter, and imagine the frost outside pressing harder against the walls, as though something vast and invisible is testing the timber. A shiver runs through you, not from cold, but from the thought of the Jötnar, the frost giants of Norse belief. You've heard whispers already tonight, muttered jokes about giants keeping the air cold, warnings to children not to stray near cracks in the wall. It's half playful, half serious. To the Vikings, the frost giants weren't just characters from bedtime tales. They were explanations, embodiments of the merciless cold itself. When the wind howled, it wasn't just air moving across the land. It was a giant's breath, heavy with malice. When snow piled against the door, it was the weight of their hands pressing down. The embers glow faintly, but your eyes wander to the shadows stretching across the rafters. In the flicker of the fire, shapes shift and twist. You could almost believe a giant's outline crouches there, its icy fingers poking through the smoke hole in the roof. The thought makes you chuckle nervously, but then again, what is myth but a way to name the fear you already feel? Quirky tidbit. Some scholars suggest the Jötnar weren't just monsters, but representations of natural forces, Frost giants, fire giants, mountain giants, all expressions of the environment that shaped Viking life. Historians still argue whether people literally believed in enormous beings stomping around the landscape or whether they were metaphors. Yet, lying here, feeling the cold creep against your toes, metaphor and reality blur. Does it matter whether it's a storm or a giant if both can kill you? The children stir as someone near the fire hums, "Zao," oftly, almost like a warding chant. Perhaps it's a lullaby, perhaps a prayer. The words drift, half audible, mentions of Thor's hammer, of storms broken, of frost shattered. The belief is clear. Only the gods stand between humans and the giants. Fire, food and furs may protect bodies, but stories and faith guard minds. Without them, terror might crawl too far into the dark. You let your mind wander outward past the sod walls into the night. The wind rises again, shrieking, and you imagine it as a chorus of giants calling to one another across the mountains. Their voices echo, low and mournful, filling the valley. Snow whirls like their cloaks. Ice shards glint like their teeth. The longhouse groans as if under their weight. The image is absurd and yet terrifying. You pull the fur higher over your face, hiding as though the cloak could shield you from myth. And yet, in the sagas, giants aren't always pure enemies. Some are cunning, some beautiful, some even lovers of gods. That contradiction fascinates you. The Jotnar embody fear, but they also embody mystery, something beyond human control, but not beyond human imagination. Maybe that's why the Vikings respected them, even as they feared them. You can fight a giant, yes, but you can also learn from one, bargain with one, even marry one. In that way, frost giants become more than villains. They become neighbours as inconvenient and dangerous as winter itself. Historians still debate how much of this belief bled into daily life. Did Vikings truly think frost giants stalked their doorsteps, or did they use the tales as teaching tools for children, keeping them cautious of the night? It's impossible to know for certain, but in the hush of the longhouse, when the wind claws at the sod walls, you can see how easy it would be to believe. After all, when survival balances so precariously on fire and food, every storm feels personal. A dog growls faintly at your feet, its ears twitching. You glance down, and for a heartbeat you imagine it senses something beyond the wall, giant footsteps rumbling in the snow. The thought makes your chest tighten. You know it's only the wind, only the shifting of ice on the roof. But in the dim glow, every sound is amplified, every shadow a threat. Myth is not an escape here, it's a lens sharpening the edge of reality. The old storyteller shifts in his sleep, muttering words you can't quite catch. Maybe it's another fragment of saga, maybe a dream. Either way, it reminds you that myths don't end when the voice quiets. They linger, they bleed into thought, they shape how you interpret each creak and sigh of the house. In the Viking mind, the world is alive with presence. Giants aren't far-off fantasies. They're just outside, pressing their icy breath against the door. Quirky detail? Some Icelandic manuscripts describe frost giants as so massive that their eyebrows alone formed mountain ranges. Others picture them as shaggy, hulking figures, dripping with icicles, their skin as pale as snow. Whether enormous or vaguely human-sized, their existence explained the relentless cruelty of the cold north. Historians still argue which image was dominant, but both share the same truth. Giants were terrifyingly real in the cultural imagination. You pull the fur tighter, feeling the warmth of the dog still curled against you. For all the smoke and stink of the longhouse, this shared cocoon feels safe, sacred almost. Maybe that's why the stories matter so much. The giants may howl outside, but inside you have fire, food, kin, and words. Myth transforms terror into narrative, something you can manage, something you can endure. Your eyelids grow heavy, the roar of wind fading into background, but as you slip towards sleep, you can't help but imagine the scene outside, hulking shapes trudging through snow, frost clinging to their beards, eyes glowing faintly blue in the moonlight. They lean against the walls, testing, listening, waiting, and yet they cannot enter. The fire holds them at bay. The longhouse for tonight is stronger than giants. You exhale slowly, letting the image dissolve into dream. Giants or no giants, the night will pass, dawn will come, and perhaps, when it does, the frost will seem less monstrous. But for now, you understand why the Vikings filled their nights with tales of Jötnar. It wasn't foolishness, it was survival. To name the cold was to give it shape, to turn endless, formless fear into something you could fight, or at least imagine fighting. And with that thought, you surrender to slumber, wrapped in fur and story alike, safe within the fragile fortress of smoke, straw, and sagas. The frost giants drift into your dreams, but the moment you stir awake again, the soundscape shifts. It isn't the crackle of embers or the sigh of wind that fills your ears now. It's silence, heavy and absolute. The longhouse breathes around you, bodies pressed close, but in your mind's eye you see a different scene entirely. The longboats, pulled onto shore, resting under blankets of snow. You imagine yourself outside, stepping into the frozen night. The fjord is stiff with ice, the sea itself groaning under the weight of winter. Along the shore, the proud, dragon-prowed ships stand like slumbering beasts. Their hulls, once wet with spray, are now stiff with frost, timbers creaking as if they too feel the bite of the cold. Ropes lie stiff and brittle, anchors half buried in frozen sand. These are the tools of summer, of conquest and trade, now reduced to silent hulks beneath snowdrifts. You trail your hand along one of the hulls, your fingers numbed by the chill. The wood is pale, rimed with frost crystals that sparkle faintly in moonlight. Each plank tells a story of waves crossed, storms endured, raids launched, markets visited. But now, in the grip of winter, all those stories are paused. The ships hibernate like bears, patient, waiting for the thaw. Quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe the Vikings hauled their ships inland during winter, dragging them up ramps of logs and resting them in boathouses. Others argue many were simply left at shore, frozen in ice, their crews tending them through the cold months. Historians still argue which was more common, but either way the image is clear. Ships slept in winter as much as people did. You picture the crew members in their longhouses, restless, sailors born to move, to cut across waves, now trapped on land. Their dreams must be restless too, visions of distant coasts, of treasure, of spray against their faces. To endure winter, they had to transform into something else, living not as raiders or traders, but as farmers, herders, and storytellers. Yet the boats waited faithfully, ready to wake the moment the fjords thawed. You imagine yourself climbing into one of the ships, the deck stiff with ice. You huddle in your cloak, staring out at the frozen horizon. In your mind, the sea isn't dead. It's sleeping, just like the boats. And when it wakes, it will roar back to life, carrying these vessels and their crews into new stories. The fire pops behind you, snapping you back to the smoky hall. You realize that even here, even now, the sea is never far. Men in the longhouse whisper about it, telling stories of voyages gone by, of raids on English monasteries, of trades in Frankish markets. Children dream of it, their eyes wide as they hear tales of endless horizons. Even in the dead of winter, the ocean is part of the room, a silent presence curled in the corners. A sailor near the fire rolls over in his sleep, muttering about sails and storms. His hands twitch as though gripping an oar. You smile, realizing that the sea lives in them even as they sleep on dry land. It's more than work, more than travel. It's identity. To be Viking is to be of the sea, and even when the ships rest, their spirit doesn't. Quirky fact: some sagas claim ships were treated almost as living beings, given names, honoured like companions. To cover a ship in winter was to protect a friend, to ensure it survived the long dark. Historians still debate how much ritual surrounded this, but the evidence suggests deep respect. Ships weren't just wood and sail, they were extensions of self, family, clan. The wind howls outside, and you imagine the longboats groaning against it, straining in their sleep like restless horses. Perhaps the sailors believed the boats dreamed too, their dragon prows staring through snow at horizons hidden by ice. It's a comforting thought that even when frozen, the spirit of adventure doesn't die. It waits, patient, coiled like a spring. Inside, the hall is warm with fire and breath, but your mind lingers on the frozen shore. You picture the scene: moonlight on snow, boats lined in neat rows, the fjord locked in silence. Yet beneath the ice, currents still move, tides still pull. The world is never truly still, only paused. Just as the embers under ash wait to be stirred, the sea waits under ice, ready to roar again. Historians still argue whether winter was a blessing or curse for Viking sailors. On one hand, it trapped them, halting raids and trade. On the other, it gave time for repair, for weaving new sails, for sharpening axes, for telling sagas. Perhaps winter was less of a prison and more of a workshop, a long inhale before the exhale of spring voyages. You close your eyes and imagine spring, the ice cracking, water gleaming, sails unfurling. Men push the boats back into the fjord, voices raised, laughter echoing. The dragons awaken, prows cutting forward, oars dipping in rhythm. The longhouse empties, the hall grows quiet, and the world once again becomes a place of movement. But tonight, the ships sleep, and so do you. The longhouse may be your shelter, but part of your soul drifts outward, curled under snow beside the frozen hulls. You dream not only of fire and straw, but of salt wind, creaking decks, and the endless horizon waiting beyond the thaw. And as you slip into slumber again, you realize this: even in the coldest night, even in the darkest hall, the Viking spirit is never bound by walls. It stretches outward, across. Is seas and storms carried on the promise of ships that wait patiently under snow. The fire sighs, the smoke drifts upward, and you notice the walls again, the sod, timber and moss that keep this place alive. But your eye catches something different this time. Hides. Along one side of the hall, thick reindeer skins hang flat against the timber, their fur side turned inward. Someone has tacked them carefully with wooden pegs like crude wallpaper. You run your hand across one and feel how it breaks the draft, blocking the invisible fingers of cold from reaching your skin. It's a clever trick. A wall of turf and timber may slow the wind, but it can't stop it. The hides add another layer, turning the longhouse into something closer to a padded cocoon. You imagine the moment of inspiration, a villager realizing that reindeer once skinned could continue their work as guardians of warmth long after their meat filled the stew pot. Nothing wasted, not hide, not horn, not bone. The Vikings were masters of utility. A man adjusts one of the hides, pulling it taut, and mutters about whether more should be added. His neighbour shakes his head, insisting that too many hides trap too much smoke, suffocating the hall. They bicker lightly, each convinced of their expertise. You grin. Historians still argue the same thing. Did Vikings commonly hang hides as insulation, or is this an exaggeration? The debate continues, and here you are, watching it play out in real time. The hides aren't uniform. Some are pale, dappled with brown, others dark and rich, stitched together in awkward seams. They form a patchwork tapestry, accidental art born of survival. You squint, and in the flicker of firelight the shapes resemble mountains, forests, even storm clouds. It's as if the walls carry a second landscape inside, mirroring the world outside in fur and skin. Quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found impressions of hide tack holes in old timber posts, evidence that skins may indeed have lined walls. Whether they were insulation, decoration, or both, no one can say for sure. But standing here, you feel the logic. Why let valuable warmth slip away when fur can hold it back? A child traces his finger along the edge of a hide, giggling as the fur tickles his skin. His mother pulls him away, scolding gently, then smooths the hide back into place. To her, this isn't play, it's serious. Each pelt is a shield, a defense against the giants of frost pressing at the door. You glance at her face, lit by firelight, and see the weight of responsibility there. She knows that if one draft slips through, it could mean sickness or worse. You sit back and listen to the ongoing debate between the men. One insists hides are too precious to waste on walls. They should be worn, not tacked. The other argues that no cloak, no matter how thick, can protect you if the house itself bleeds heat. Their words blur into the smoke, but you find yourself agreeing with both. Comfort is always a negotiation here, a constant balancing act between body and building. The fire pops, sending sparks upward, and for a moment the hides glow golden in the flicker. You imagine how different this hall would feel without them. The cold would snake through the cracks, chilling every corner. The draft would crawl along the floor, nipping at toes, seeping under blankets. The hides may not ache the longhouse warm, but they make it survivable. Historians still debate whether wealthier families lined entire rooms with skins, creating near-luxury conditions, while poorer households made do with scraps. The truth probably lies in between, with hides used sparingly, reserved for the most exposed walls or for the sleeping areas of children and elders. Looking around, you see the logic. The hides are clustered near benches where families lie closest to the draft. Survival is triage. Protect the weakest first. You think back to your own home, to insulation hidden behind drywall, invisible and silent. Efficient, yes, but impersonal. Here, insulation is visible, tangible, alive. It carries texture, color, scent. It reminds you daily that survival depends on effort, on choices, on the skin of beasts that once roamed the same land. Quirky image. You imagine a Viking entering this hall for the first time after a long journey, seeing walls lined with fur, and thinking it looks almost luxurious, like stepping into a giant's cloak. Maybe they even joked about it. Welcome to the reindeer's belly, where the frost can't reach you. It's not hard to picture, especially with the faint humour woven into so many sagas. You lie back, watching shadows play across the hides. They ripple faintly as the wind pushes against the outer wall, moving like sails in a storm. You can almost hear the skins whispering, their fur brushing the timber. It's eerie and comforting at once, a reminder that even in death, animals continue to guard the living. The debate between the two men fades as they settle under their cloaks. One mutters something about adding more hides tomorrow. The other snorts in disagreement. You smile softly. Arguments end not with decisions, but with exhaustion. The longhouse survives another night regardless. You pull your own cloak closer, running your fingers over the wool, and glance again at the hides. They seem to shimmer in the dim glow, their patchwork edges blending into the shadows. They are imperfect, crude, but they hold the line. Outside, frost giants may pace and howl, but inside, fur and fire stand together, shielding fragile human breath. As your eyes grow heavy, you think about insulation in every form. Straw under your body, moss in the walls, hides on the timber, fat in your belly, mead in your blood. Each piece alone is weak. Together, they form an armor that even Scandinavian winter can't pierce. And maybe that's the truest lesson of all. Survival is never one thing. It's everything, layered, patched, argued over, stitched into place with stubborn will. The hides whisper softly in the draft. You let the sound lull you, imagining it as the breath of the longhouse itself. The hall inhales, exhales, endures, and wrapped in its patchwork warmth, so do you. The hides whisper faintly in the drafts, but your attention shifts upward where shadows tremble along the rafters. A soft glow flickers there, weaker than firelight, more fragile. You squint and realize it's candlelight. Slender beeswax tapers perched in iron holders, their flames quivering with every breath of air. They don't burn bright like the hearth, but they add a quiet shimmer, painting the longhouse in trembling gold. You follow the glow as it pools across faces. A woman weaves quietly beside one candle, her fingers moving nimbly through threads. The flame throws her shadow large against the wall, her body doubled in size like some mythic figure spinning fate itself. A boy sits beside her, eyes wide as he watches the light, mesmerized by its dance. There is no glass, no steady bulb, only this fragile flame standing against the dark. The smell of beeswax drifts faintly through the smoke. Sweet, earthy, almost pleasant, quirky tidbit. Beeswax candles were precious, often reserved for wealthier households or special occasions. Most families relied on tallow candles, made from rendered animal fat. Those burned dirtier, smoked heavily, and stank faintly of cooked meat. Historians still argue how often beeswax was used in ordinary homes versus churches or halls of the wealthy, but here tonight at least a few flames shine with that golden, clean glow. You tilt your head toward a smaller light near the wall. There, instead of a candle, a simple oil lamp flickers, a clay bowl filled with fish oil, a rag wick floating at its surface. Its flame is lower, sputtering but steady enough to mark the shape of a shield hanging above it. The hall doesn't glow evenly. Instead, patches of light bloom here and there, like islands in a sea of shadow. The fire in the center is the sun, and these tiny flames are its scattered stars. Your gaze drifts upward again, past the candles, through the smoke hole in the roof. Beyond it, the moon shines faintly, silvering the snow outside. Sometimes, when the clouds part, moonlight spills directly through the hole, mixing with fire and candle, turning the hall into a strange collage of light sources. Straight-on firelight, quivering candlelight, pale moonlight, all overlapping, all imperfect. And yet the effect is oddly beautiful. The hall is not just a shelter. Tonight it feels like a lantern in the frozen dark. A girl giggles softly as her brother cups his hand near a candle, stretching his fingers to cast giant shadows on the wall. He moves them like puppets, making animals dance, jaws snap, wings flap. The others laugh, entertained by this impromptu theatre. You smile at the innocence. Shadow play, one of humanity's oldest games, here alive in a smoky longhouse. The candlelight isn't only survival, it's magic for restless minds. Historians still debate whether Vikings used many candles at once or relied mostly on the hearth's glow. Candles required resources, fat or wax, cloth for wicks, none of which were endless. Some suggest a single taper might burn for hours, shared by an entire household. Others argue that several might be lit during long nights of work. Either way, you realize how precious every flame was. Each one represented labor, trade, or sacrifice. To light a candle wasn't casual, it was intentional, even ceremonial. Quirky fact: beeswax was sometimes imported from distant lands, making it a luxury product. Imagine the pride of lighting such a candle. The way its clean burn and honey-sweet scent would mark the hall as special. Perhaps tonight is such a night. Perhaps the feast earlier justified it. Or perhaps the family simply needed the extra light to work and tell stories through the endless night. The glow paints the hides on the walls in gold, softening their rough seams. It picks out the grain in timber, the gleam on iron tools, the sheen on bowls stacked near the hearth. It even glitters faintly on the eyes of the animals curled on the floor, turning goats and dogs into quiet statues of survival. Everywhere the light touches, the hall feels warmer, more alive. But beyond the reach of those flames, the darkness is thick, almost solid. Corners vanish into shadow, rafters disappear into black. The contrast sharpens your awareness. Light here is never absolute, always fragile. It reminds you of mortality, of how thin the line is between safety and exposure. A single gust could snuff a candle, plunging half the hall into blindness. That fragility humbles you. You imagine stepping outside, where the moon paints the snow silver, the fjord frozen stiff. The world there is pale, sharp-edged, endless. The longhouse, by contrast, is a pocket of golden defiance, flames flickering against infinite dark. You realize why candles matter, not just for light, but for courage. They say, "We are here, we shine, we endure." A man leans over to trim a wick with a small iron tool, snipping the charred end. The flame steadies, burning cleaner. Such maintenance is constant. Neglect it and the flame sputters, smokes, dies. You watch closely, fascinated by how much attention these tiny lights demand. Fire is never passive here. It is a living partner, requiring care, respect, vigilance. Whether heart, H or candle, it is always tended. Historians still argue whether Vikings considered light itself sacred, tied to gods like Balder, whose radiance filled the myths. But lying here, watching shadows stretch and shrink with every flicker, you feel the sacredness without explanation. Light isn't just practical, it's emotional. It calms, it protects, it connects. Without it, the long night would feel unbearable. The children drift to sleep, shadows shrinking as their play fades. The adults settle too, cloaks pulled higher, faces soft in the glow. The candles burn lower, one guttering until only the hearth remains. Slowly the hall sinks back toward darkness, only the faintest flickers surviving. You exhale, soothed by the rhythm. Daylight is far away, but you don't need it yet. You have enough. Enough fire to warm your body, enough story to calm your mind, enough flickering flame to remind you that the dark, however vast, never wins completely. And as your eyes close, the last image etched in your mind is simple. A candle flame, trembling but unbroken, defying the cold night with a golden whisper. The candlelight fades, the hall slides deeper into shadow, and your attention drifts toward the smallest figures in the room, the children. Their presence is unmistakable. You hear a faint whimper, then a muffled laugh, then the shuffle of tiny bodies rolling restlessly in the straw. You lift your head slightly and see them bundled in layers of wool and fur, their faces barely visible, only noses and cheeks peeking out like red berries against the pale haze of smoke. Children are not given the luxury of separate beds. Instead, they are sandwiched between parents, grandparents, and siblings, tucked in as if they are living embers in a human hearth. You notice one boy wedged between his father and mother, their cloaks overlapping to form a tent around him. His small hand sticks out, grasping a tuft of the sheepskin beneath him. Another girl lies with her grandmother, wrapped so tightly that she looks more like a cocoon than a child. Her breathing is slow, steady, her tiny body pressed close to keep her warmth from escaping. It's easy to see why this arrangement exists. Children are heat batteries, as practical as they are beloved. Their small bodies radiate warmth, and by nestling them between adults, the family conserves heat collectively. Quirky tidbit. Some sources suggest that infants might even be placed near the center of sleeping groups, their vulnerability ensuring they were literally surrounded by warmth on every side. Historians still argue whether this was universal practice or simply instinct. But as you watch a mother tuck her infant closer, you sense it was more necessity than choice. A baby stirs, fussing softly, and the mother lifts him against her chest, wrapping her cloak around them both. The sound of his cry pierces the hush, but no one complains. Instead, a few others murmur soothingly, even in half-sleep. In this hall, the care of children isn't just a mother's task. It belongs to everyone. Each small life is a fragile flame that must be guarded, and in the long Scandinavian winter, flames cannot be allowed to die. The air is thick with warmth from so many bodies, but you know the danger too. Illness lingers in crowded halls, coughs spread quickly, fevers more quickly still. Yet the alternative, separating children, exposing them to drafts, would be worse. Historians still debate how often disease swept through longhouses, but skeletal evidence suggests high infant mortality. Tonight, watching a mother press her lips to her baby's forehead, you understand the constant vigilance required. Love and survival are indistinguishable here. A boy squirms free of his blanket, giggling in his sleep, his small foot sticking out into the cold air. His sister, eyes half closed, shoves it back under the cover with an annoyed grunt. You chuckle softly, realizing that even in the 9th century, siblings bickered under the blankets. Some things never change. You think about the rhythm of childhood here. No toys clutter the hall, no books line the benches. Entertainment comes from sagas, chores, games played with carved bones or sticks. Children learn early that survival is everyone's job. They gather moss for insulation, carry water in wooden buckets, chase goats, stir pots. But at night, in the dim glow of embers, they are allowed to be simply warm and safe, pressed close in the communal bed of the longhouse. Quirky detail. Archaeologists have found small, carved toys in Viking settlements, tiny wooden horses, bone figurines, even miniature ships. Imagine a child clutching one under the furs, dreaming of seafaring adventures while nestled between snoring parents. Historians still argue whether these were common playthings or rare treasures, but the image lingers, a wooden toy horse smoothed by years of small hands hidden in straw beside a sleeping child. The fire pops, startling a boy awake. He blinks, rubs his eyes, then buries his face against his mother's shoulder. She strokes his hair absent-mindedly, her other hand holding the cloak tight. You watch them, struck by how universal the gesture is. Across centuries, across cultures, the act of soothing a child looks the same. A hand on the head, a whisper, a steady presence. The longhouse creaks as wind claws at the roof, but inside the children breathe steadily, each sigh a small testament of resilience. Their presence fills the hall not just with warmth, but with purpose. Every story told, every hide hung, every ember banked, all of it is for them. To keep them alive through the winter is to keep the community alive, the lineage unbroken. Historians still argue about how Viking families viewed children. Were they treasured or simply expected to survive if strong enough? Evidence points both ways. Burial sites show children honored with care, sometimes laid to rest with toys or small tools. Yet sagas occasionally treat childhood as fleeting, a time of little consequence before the duties of adulthood. Watching these bundled forms, though, you can't doubt the tenderness present. Even in the harshest conditions, affection lingers. You feel the weight of your own cloak, the press of fur against your chin, and you imagine lying as a child here, hearing stories, smelling smoke, feeling the warmth of bodies all around. It would be cramped, itchy, noisy, but safe. Perhaps safer than any solitude could offer. Children didn't grow up in silence, they grew up in chorus, the lullaby of 100 breaths, rising and falling in rhythm. A girl turns in her sleep, murmuring something you can't catch. Her grandmother smiles faintly, still awake, and tucks the blanket higher. You realize then that the act of keeping children warm is not just about bodies. It's about memory, about passing down stories, skills, and love. The warmth extends beyond skin. It's the warmth of continuity, of one generation folding itself around the next. You close your eyes, the sounds of children's breathing blending with the crackle of the fire and the sigh of wind, and you think, if the longhouse is a body, then the children are its heart, small, fragile, but pumping life forward into the future. Without them, all the warmth in the world would mean nothing. As you drift, that thought anchors you. The cold outside is vast, endless, merciless, but here inside, between wool, fur, straw and family, a flame burns on. The flame is small, wrapped in layers, pressed close, but it endures, and as long as the children breathe steadily in the smoky dark, the Viking world will survive another night. The children are quiet now, bundled like little embers in the longhouse's great furnace of bodies. You shift, letting your eyes wander and see another rhythm at play, one that does not stop even in the depth of night. Women working with their hands. Near the hearth, a woman sits upright, her shoulders draped in a russet cloak, her fingers deftly twisting fibres into thread. She works almost without looking, her eyes half closed, body swaying with the rhythm of spinning. A drop spindle whirls in her lap, the weighted stone at the bottom pulling flax and wool into a fine strand. The faint whir of the spindle blends with the crackle of the fire, creating a steady lullaby of industry. You lean closer, fascinated. In this world, warmth isn't only furs and fire, it's fabric. Every cloak, every blanket, every sock stuffed with moss has to be made by hand. And so the women of the longhouse spin and weave, day after day, even at night. Their work is as constant as the hearth. Quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found thousands of spindle whorls across Viking sites, tiny carved stones that once weighted spinning tools. They were so common that some scholars argue nearly every woman spun fibre daily, her hands always busy, even while walking or telling stories. Historians still argue whether spinning was universal or specialised, but the sheer number of whorls suggests that thread was life, as essential as food or fire. The woman shifts, reaching for a basket beside her. Inside lie tufts of wool, cleaned but still carrying the faint smell of sheep. She teases the fibres apart, rolling them between her fingers before feeding them into the spindle again. The wool stretches, twists, binds. It's almost hypnotic to watch. You realise that each cloak hanging on the walls, each blanket covering children, each rug on the floor, began in a woman's lap, spun thread by thread across. The hall, another woman sits by a wooden loom propped against the wall. It's a warp-weighted loom, heavy stones dangling at the bottom to keep threads taut. She passes a shuttle through the vertical strands, beating the weft down with a smooth wooden sword. The sound is rhythmic. Swish, thud, swish, thud. Even in low light, she works steadily, her hands moving by memory. Her child leans against her leg, already half asleep, lulled by the sound of weaving. You imagine the cloth forming slowly, weeks of work for a single bolt. Thick, sturdy wool, rough but warm, dyed in earthy hues of russet, indigo, or saffron. Nothing wasted, nothing hurried. Each thread is deliberate, each pattern chosen with care. Historians still debate whether women wove mostly plain, practical fabric or intricate patterns of stripes and checks. Either way, the result was the same: survival stitched into existence. You chuckle softly at a thought. While sagas sing of warriors with swords and kings with crowns, perhaps the true heroes of winter were women with looms. Without them, no cloak, no blanket, no sail. Ships themselves depended on their labour, woolen sails vast enough to catch the wind, strong enough to carry warriors to far coasts. The longhouse may be filled with talk of raids and voyages, but here in the dim light you see the quiet truth. Women spun the threads of survival, literally and metaphorically. Quirky fact: sagas sometimes use weaving as a metaphor for fate. The Norns, mythical women at the roots of Yggdrasil, wove the destinies of gods and men alike. To spin, to weave, These were not just chores but echoes of cosmic power. Watching the women now, their hands steady in the glow of embers, you understand why. To weave is to hold the line between life and death, warmth and frost, continuity and oblivion. The smell of wool grows stronger as more fibers are teased apart. It mixes with the smoke, the sweat, the musk of animals, creating a new note in the longhouse's perfume. You inhale deeply. It's sharp, oily, raw, but also reassuring. Wool means safety. Wool means another blanket on a child, another cloak on a man venturing into the snow. One woman hums softly as she works, her tune rising above the spindle's whir. Another joins her, then another, until the hall hums faintly with a wordless song. It isn't loud, isn't meant for performance. It's simply rhythm for the hands, breath for the work. The sound soothes you too, carrying you deeper into the moment. Historians still argue whether Viking women spun and wove year-round or concentrated in winter. Some say long dark nights demanded constant weaving to prepare for raids and farming seasons. Others suggest winter left little else to do, making it the perfect time to produce cloth. Watching now, you believe both. Survival doesn't follow schedules. It demands constant labor whenever hands can move. A child stirs and mumbles, and his mother shifts the spindle to her other hand, stroking his hair with the free one. The motion is seamless, comfort and labor intertwined. You realize there was no separation between roles here. Women didn't stop being mothers to spin, or stop spinning to mother. Both were woven together, threads of the same cloth. You glance again at the loom, the half-finished textile glowing faintly in firelight. Its pattern is simple, striped in russet and grey, but it feels monumental. Each inch carries hours of effort. Each stripe carries intent. It's not just fabric, it's memory, identity, survival, all stitched together. Quirky image. You imagine a Viking woman proudly wrapping her child in a cloak. She spun herself, pointing to the pattern and saying, "I made this with my hands." There's pride there. Quiet but deep. Historians still debate how much recognition women received for such work, but the evidence of their labor remains in every scrap of cloth unearthed, every spindle whirl buried in soil. Their fingerprints linger across centuries. You sink back into your straw bedding, the hum of spinning and weaving still in your ears. The fire pops, sending sparks upward, briefly illuminating the hall. Shadows leap across the rafters, across the hides, across the faces of women bent over their work. For a moment, it feels as though the Norns themselves have descended into this smoky longhouse, spinning and weaving the threads of human life. Your eyes grow heavy, lulled by the rhythm. You understand now that warmth isn't only the fire's gift. It's also the work of hands, endless and unseen, spinning fibers into fabric, fabric into survival. Without it, the hall would be bare, the children exposed, the warriors cloakless, the ships sailless. And as you drift towards sleep, one thought lingers. The gods may wield thunder, men may wield swords, but women wield thread. And in the Viking world, thread is power. The low hum of spinning wheels fades as the women finally rest their hands. Silence seeps into the longhouse again, broken only by the occasional cough, the bleat of a goat, or the creak of timber under frost. You pull your cloak tighter, letting the warmth of straw, fur, and animal breath cocoon you, and you realize that the final layer of protection against winter isn't wool or fire at all, it's faith. Someone near the hearth murmurs softly, words you almost don't catch. It's not a story this time, but a prayer, spoken to the gods in the stillness of night. The words tumble out like a half-whispered plea for safety, for warmth, for dawn. Faith here isn't a luxury, it's a lifeline, a shield against despair. When the frost presses close, when the smoke chokes your lungs, when you wake coughing and shivering, belief offers something fire cannot: hope. You let your mind wander into that realm of belief where gods and warriors mingle with frost and death. You picture Odin himself, seated high in Valhalla, one eye gleaming in the firelight, watching over these humble sleepers. You imagine Thor's hammer striking in the distance, breaking apart icy storms, and you think of Valhalla, not as a place of endless battle, as the sagas often describe, but as a hall filled with warmth, feasts and mead, where cold never bites and hunger never gnaws. Quirky tidbit. Some sagas describe warriors dreaming of Valhalla even while alive, convinced that visions of its golden hall came during sleep. They believed their souls stepped briefly into Odin's hall before returning to their bodies at dawn. Historians still argue whether this was a literal belief or poetic imagery, but as you lie in the smoky longhouse half dreaming, you understand how convincing such visions might have been. In the fragile space between waking and sleep, Valhalla must have felt only a heartbeat away. The fire pops and sparks leap upward, glowing like tiny stars. For a moment, the smoke hole above seems less like a vent and more like a portal, opening into the sky beyond. You imagine souls drifting upward with the smoke, carried to Odin's hall on streams of ember and ash. The image lingers, half terrifying, half comforting. Death is always near in winter, but so is eternity. A man stirs in his sleep, muttering, and you catch the name Freya on his lips. It makes you smile faintly. Not all longed for Valhalla. Some hoped instead to join Freya in Folkvanga, her field of the slain, where half of warriors were said to go. Others believed in hell, not the fiery torment of later Christian imagination, but a shadowy, quiet realm where most souls wandered. The afterlife was not singular, but plural, varied, a patchwork of hopes and fears. You let your thoughts drift further. What must it have felt like to face each night knowing frost might take you, knowing hunger or sickness could strike? Perhaps belief wasn't just comfort, it was armor against dread. To think, if I die tonight, I might feast with Odin, or rest in Freya's field, or walk in quiet hell. Any of these destinations felt more dignified, more hopeful than the void of nothing. Quirky fact. Some graves unearthed in Viking lands show warriors buried with weapons, women with tools, children with toys. It suggests they carried into death the things they needed for eternity. Historians still debate whether these items were practical provisions for the afterlife or symbols of status, but either way, they prove belief shaped even the most final of preparations. The hall exhales softly, a collective sigh of sleepers. You glance at the faces around you, lined with soot, softened by fatigue, glowing faintly in the firelight. Some clutch amulets around their necks, Thor's hammer carved in bone, a charm against storms and frost. Others simply hold their children closer, faith woven into flesh and blood. The forms differ, but the core is the same. Belief that the night can be endured, that the cold cannot win forever. The old storyteller stirs again, his lips moving silently. You imagine he dreams of sagas, of heroes meeting gods at great feasts. Perhaps he walks Valhalla's golden hall even now, his voice carrying tales to Odin himself. The thought makes you smile. In this world, storytellers might not wield swords, but their afterlife reward must have been just as sweet. Eternal audience, eternal firelight, eternal words. Historians still argue whether ordinary farmers thought of Valhalla as their destiny, or whether it was an elite dream, reserved for warriors. But you sense that didn't matter in practice. The stories spread warmth to everyone, not just fighters. Even if only a few believed they'd reach Odin's hall, the vision inspired the many, giving meaning to hardship. Faith, after all, doesn't need to be evenly distributed, it just needs to flicker enough to light the dark. A goat bleats softly, its breath steaming in the cold. The sound grounds you again, reminding you of the earthiness of this place. Faith does not erase the smells of dung and smoke, nor the scratch of straw against your skin. It doesn't stop you from coughing on soot or scratching at fleas, but it makes the discomfort bearable. It tells you this night is not forever. There is warmth beyond. You close your eyes, letting the thought of Valhalla seep into your mind. You picture yourself at a massive table surrounded by warriors, laughter booming louder and thunder, mead flowing endlessly. Torches blaze without smoke, furs are soft without fleas, food never runs out, and outside, frost giants roar uselessly at the gates, forever shut out. It is a dream, yes, but also a shield, something to wrap around yourself as surely as a cloak. The embers glow lower now, and the hall grows stiller. Sleep presses in, heavy and sweet. You exhale, and in your mind you whisper a quiet prayer, not to Odin or Thor, but to the longhouse itself, the walls, the hides, the straw, the people pressed around you. This too is a kind of faith, belief in the collective, in the fragile fortress of wood and moss that has carried countless winters already. And with that you drift once more, your last thought clear, whether by fire, by cloak, by kin, or by gods, warmth always finds a way. The faith-filled hush of the longhouse lingers, but outside the world is stirring. You blink awake to a new sound, dripping. At first it seems like the steady patter of someone pouring water, but no, it's the thaw. Snowmelt runs from the roof in thin rivulets, tapping against the sod below. The longhouse walls, stiff with frost only hours before, glisten faintly as ice loosens its grip. For the first time in months, the air carries not only the sharp bite of cold, but a whisper of softness, a promise that winter's reign is ending. You push yourself up from the straw, joints stiff, and peer toward the door. A faint glow leaks through the cracks, not the pale blue of snowlight, but the gentler gold of morning sun. It feels unfamiliar, almost alien after so many nights of grey skies and endless frost. You rise slowly, careful not to disturb the sleepers still cocooned in their cloaks, and make your way to the entrance. The door creaks as you push it open, and the outside world greets you with a rush of crisp air. Cold, yes, but carrying a different note, lighter, fresher. The sight before you takes your breath away. Snow still blankets the ground, but patches of earth peek through, dark and wet. Tiny shoots of green poke timidly upward, trembling in the morning chill. A raven calls overhead, its wings black against the sky, circling as if to announce the change. The fjord, once locked in ice, glimmers with narrow ribbons of water where the surface has cracked. The long silence of winter is breaking, and the land exhales. Behind you, others stir. A child toddles to the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and gasps at the sight of green. She tugs her mother's cloak, pointing excitedly. The woman smiles faintly, exhaustion softening into relief. One by one, families gather at the threshold, faces lit by a light they haven't seen in months. No one speaks loudly. The moment feels too fragile, too sacred for noise. Quirky tidbit. Archaeological evidence shows that spring was celebrated in many northern cultures with rituals, offerings of food or tools buried in thawing soil, gifts to the gods for safe passage through winter. Historians still argue whether these were small, private acts or community-wide ceremonies. But watching the faces in this longhouse, you understand why. To survive the long dark and see the thaw was nothing less than miraculous. A man steps outside, squatting to scoop a handful of earth. He squeezes the wet soil in his palm, then lets it crumble through his fingers, grinning. Another kneels, plucking one of the green shoots, holding it up as proof. The air smells different now, still smoky from the hearth, still rich with manure from the animals, but threaded with the sharp tang of thawing soil and wet moss. You inhale deeply, filling your lungs with the promise of growth. The goats bleat noisily, eager to be let out. Chickens flap down from the rafters, pecking at straw and scratching restlessly at the dirt floor. Even the animals sense the change. The longhouse, so cramped and pungent through winter, begins to feel like a shell about to crack open, releasing life back into the fields. Children run out barefoot, shrieking at the shock of cold mud squishing between their toes. Their laughter rings against the still frozen hills, a sound as bright as sunlight. Parents scold half-heartedly, but don't stop them. The joy is too contagious. For months the little ones have been wrapped like bundles in the smoky dark, confined to the hall. Now they chase one another wildly, their breath puffing in the crisp morning air, their voices carrying like birdsong. You step farther outside, boots sinking into the softening snow. The longhouse looms behind you, its sod walls dripping steadily, its roof sagging under the weight of melting frost. Yet it stands as it has stood through countless winters, scarred but unbroken. You glance back at its doorway, where families cluster, and you realize that the building itself has endured as faithfully as the people within. Historians still debate how longhouses were used in warmer months. Some argue they remained central hubs year-round, while others believe life shifted outdoors, with people sleeping under lighter shelters or even beneath the open sky. The truth may be somewhere in between, but standing here, watching the thaw, you sense that the longhouse is about to loosen its grip. It has held the community tightly through the frozen dark, and now it is ready to release them back into the open world. A boy dashes past you, waving a stick like a sword, his feet splashing through shallow meltwater. Behind him, an elder chuckles, shaking his head. The sound is warm, rich, and you realize that laughter carries differently in spring. It doesn't fight against the silence anymore. It flows with it, harmonizing with the land's own awakening. Quirky fact: Norse poetry often described spring as the earth drinking the snowmelt, the ground opening its mouth to swallow the cold and turn it into growth. Historians still argue whether this was purely poetic or linked to ritual agricultural beliefs, but you can see the truth in the metaphor. Each patch of thawing soil looks thirsty, each green shoot a tongue reaching upward. The people begin to move with purpose now. Someone fetches a wooden bucket, filling it with meltwater for the animals. Another sharpens an axe, preparing to chop timber loosened by frost. A woman spreads straw outside to dry in the sun. The rhythm of work hums faintly, but, unlike winter's desperate chores, this labor feels lighter, hopeful. Every action is not only about surviving, but about beginning again. You close your eyes and listen. Water dripping, children laughing, birds calling, tools clinking. It is music after months of silence and storm. You think back to the long nights, smoke stinging your eyes, goats pressed at your feet, coughs rattling in the dark, and now all of it feels like a dream, dissolving in sunlight. Historians still debate whether spring was greeted with feasts, rituals, or simple relief, but perhaps the truth is simpler. Survival itself was the celebration. To open your eyes and see green, to hear birds and dripping water, that was enough. It was proof that the frost giants had been defeated once more, that gods and humans together had pushed back the endless dark. The sun climbs higher, melting more snow. Puddles glimmer like silver mirrors, reflecting the longhouse and the people gathered around it. You see your own reflection too, smoke-streaked, weary, but alive. You smile, realizing that you've walked through the heart of winter with these people, shared their fire, their mead, their sagas. And now, like them, you stand in the fragile, miraculous light of survival. You turn back toward the longhouse one last time. Its walls drip, its roof glistens, its door creaks as someone steps out. It looks worn, patched, scarred, but it also looks triumphant, a fortress that held against the longest night. Soon it will return to being a place of work, of feasts, of weaving and storytelling in shorter evenings, but for now it rests, satisfied with its victory. And as you step into the thawing mud, you feel the warmth of spring on your skin, faint but undeniable. The night is over. The longhouse has kept its promise. The frost is retreating. You breathe deeply, letting the moment settle. Survival isn't just about enduring the cold, it's about seeing the thaw, the renewal, the fragile shoots of green. It's about knowing that no matter how fierce the winter, spring will come, and with it, another chance to live, to laugh, to tell stories again. And in that truth, you finally rest easy. The fire inside the longhouse burns low now, little more than a soft red glow. The night has passed, and with it, the long tale of endurance. You lie back, letting your breath slow, feeling your body sink into the straw as if the earth itself is cradling you. Outside, water drips steadily from the roof, a soft rhythm like a lullaby. The air no longer feels sharp, it feels gentle, cool enough to soothe but not to sting. In your mind's eye you see it all again, the flickering hearth, the scratch of straw, the laughter of children pressed close, the low hum of spinning wheels, the shimmer of candlelight against the hides. You remember the myths whispered in smoke, the frost giants pacing outside, the ships asleep beneath snow. You remember the weight of a dog curled against your feet, the taste of fat, rich stew, the sweetness of mead softening the edges of fear. And slowly, each memory softens. The smoke grows thinner, the sounds grow slower, the hall becomes quieter, safer, smaller, until it is no longer a smoky building in a frozen land, but a warm cocoon of imagination. Your breath deepens, the room fades, even the frost giants vanish, dissolving into harmless shadows. All that remains is warmth, softness, and a steady rhythm, the heartbeat of survival, the promise of spring. So let yourself drift. Let the night become background. Let the story fade into dream. You have walked through winter with the Vikings, endured their longhouse nights, and emerged into the thaw. Now, nothing more is needed. Close your eyes, rest, and sleep deeply, knowing that dawn will always come.